At the edge of the Nile, just before dawn, the world is still half hidden. The river lies dark and slow beneath a paling sky, its surface broken by reeds, waterbirds, and the first thin movements of people waking along the banks. Mud brick houses hold the last coolness of night. Granaries stand close to courtyards where sacks of emmer wheat and barley wait beneath woven covers. Somewhere inside one of these houses a child sleeps beside an oil lamp burned low. Somewhere outside, in the hush between shadow and morning, a small animal moves without sound. It slips along a wall, pauses, listens, and turns its bright eyes toward the faint scratching beneath a storage jar. A mouse freezes too late. In a moment so ordinary that no scribe bothers to record it, a cat protects a household's food, a family's labor, and perhaps a little more than either human or animal understands. This is where the mystery begins, not in a golden temple, not in a painted tomb, not in a myth of gods sailing through the underworld, but in the grain, the dark, the danger hidden in daily life. Ancient Egypt is remembered for pyramids, kings, colossal statues, and the strict geometry of eternity. Yet running through that grand world is a quieter shape. The cat sitting beneath a chair in a tomb, painting crouching near a marsh bird, carved into amulets wrapped in linen buried by the thousands, and finally lifted into the orbit of divinity. The Egyptians did not simply like cats. They brought them into their homes, gave them symbolic power, connected them with goddesses, protected them with a seriousness that startled foreign observers, and offered mummified bodies to the divine in numbers so vast that modern archaeology still struggles to measure them cleanly. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate exactly how affection, practicality, religion, economics, and state power fuse together, but what survives in the record suggests that the Egyptian cat became sacred because it stood at the crossing point of several worlds at once. To understand why Egyptians worshipped cats, it is necessary to begin with Egypt itself as a landscape of dependence. The Nile gives life, but never casually. Each year the river rises, spreads rich silt across the floodplain, then retreats, and leaves behind a ribbon of fertility bordered by desert. The contrast is severe. Green fields stretch in one direction, while dry cliffs and sand begin almost immediately beyond them. Life depends on balance. Too little flood brings famine. Too much flood brings destruction. And even in a good year, the stored harvest must survive months of heat, insects, rodents, snakes, and human anxiety. Ancient Egyptian religion grows from this sense that order is precious and disorder is always pressing close. The Egyptians call that order balance, truth rightness, the pattern that allows the sun to rise the river to flood crops, to grow kings to rule, and the dead to find their way. Anything that helps preserve order can acquire meaning beyond its visible function. In that world, a cat is not merely charming. A cat is a small hunter living among humans, but never entirely under human command. It waits in the place where disorder enters the home at the grain bin, the doorway, the reed mat, the edge of the field, the storage room, the shadowed corner where a snake may slide unseen. It is graceful, watchful, clean, affectionate when it chooses dangerous when it must be. It sleeps in sunlight and comes alive at night. It can be tender with kittens and merciless with prey. These qualities made cats useful, but they also made them symbolically rich. Egyptian religion rarely separates the practical from the sacred in the modern way. A creature that saves grain can also embody protection. A creature that sees in the dark can become linked to hidden knowledge, night journeys, and unseen threats. A creature that carries both gentleness and sudden violence can resemble the divine itself, because Egyptian gods are not one-dimensional beings. They can heal and destroy, nurture and punish, comfort and terrify, Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy. Because the story of Egypt's cats is not a simple tale of ancient people adoring a pet. It is a long unfolding relationship between humans, animals, food, fear, fertility, death, and the gods. It begins before the temples are filled with cat mummies, before Bastet becomes one of the most beloved divine figures in Egypt, before Greek and Roman writers describe Egyptian reverence with fascination and sometimes confusion. It begins when people settle into agricultural life and discover that survival creates strange partnerships. The first cats associated with Egypt are not house pets in the modern sense. Their ancestors are African wildcats, lean desert-edge hunters adapted to dry environments, sharp hearing and solitary movement. They are not pack animals waiting to be commanded. They are opportunists. When humans begin storing grain, rodents gather. When rodents gather, wildcats follow. The arrangement is almost too elegant. People create a new concentration of food pests, come to exploit it, and cats come to exploit the pests. Unlike some animals that require capture herding or strict control, cats may have entered human settlements by invitation without formal invitation. Humans tolerated them because they were useful. Cats tolerated humans because human settlements attracted prey and offered relative safety. The bargain was quiet, and it may have taken generations before anyone saw it as a relationship rather than a convenience. Yet Egypt gives this relationship a special intensity. In a land where agricultural abundance supports temples, labor forces, scribal administration, and royal monuments, stored grain is more than food. It is taxation wages, wealth, ritual offering, and political stability. A granary is not just a pantry, it is the material basis of civilization. Mice and rats are not minor nuisances. They threaten the stored energy of the state and household alike. Snakes add another layer of danger. Egypt is home to venomous species, and ancient people know very well that a bite can kill with terrifying speed. A cat that hunts rodents and confronts snakes becomes a defender of the fragile human zone carved out of floodplain and desert. No single explanation fully accounts for the later worship of cats, but this practical foundation matters. Sacredness often begins where usefulness becomes emotionally and symbolically indispensable. The earliest archaeological traces of cats in Egyptian life are subtle, compared with the later explosion of imagery and mummification. A famous burial on Cyprus, older than pharaonic Egypt, shows a human buried with a cat, suggesting that close human-feline associations in the Eastern Mediterranean and Near East began very early. In Egypt, the evidence becomes clearer over time, especially in art and burial contexts. Tomb scenes from the Middle and New Kingdoms show cats beneath chairs, near women among birds, or participating in hunting scenes that may be realistic, symbolic, or both. These images are easy to underestimate because they can look domestic and charming, but Egyptian tomb art is never casual decoration. It preserves ideals, relationships, roles, hopes, and magical continuities. When a cat appears beneath the chair of a noblewoman, it may signal household intimacy, feminine grace, erotic undertones, protection, or all of these at once. What survives in the record suggests layered meaning rather than a single fixed code. There is also something deeply Egyptian about honoring animals without seeing them as mere animals. Ancient Egyptian religion is filled with animal forms: falcons, ibises, jackals, crocodiles, cows, bulls, cobras, lions, scarabs, rams, cats. Modern viewers sometimes misunderstand this as simple animal worship, as though Egyptians believed every cat or crocodile was automatically a god in the most literal way. The reality is more complex. Animals could be manifestations, symbols, vessels, or living images of divine power. Their forms expressed qualities that human bodies could not. The falcon's sky vision suited Horus. The jackal's presence near desert cemeteries suited Anubis. The cow's nourishment suited Hathor. The cobra's sudden lethal defense suited royal protection. The cat's combination of watchfulness, fertility, domestic closeness, and predatory precision suited several divine ideas, especially those gathered around Bastet. But Bastet does not begin as a soft household cat goddess in the way modern imagination often presents her. Her story is older, sharper, and more changeable. In earlier periods, she's associated with lioness-like power, fierce protection, and royal force. Over time, especially as the domestic cat becomes more visible and culturally important, Bastet's image shifts. She does not lose danger entirely, but her danger becomes wrapped in intimacy. She becomes connected with music, joy, fertility, perfume, motherhood, pleasure, and home protection. This transformation is one of the most revealing parts of the whole mystery. It shows that Egyptians are not worshipping cats simply because cats are useful hunters. They are mapping feline qualities onto changing religious needs. The lioness and the house cat are not opposites in Egyptian thought. They are points along the same sacred spectrum, from desert fury to household warmth, from royal violence to maternal defense. This is why the cat can appear so calm in Egyptian art and still carry enormous force. A painted cat beneath a chair may look like a pet enjoying the shade, but it belongs to a civilization that sees power in posture, color, gesture, and placement. A cat's stillness is not emptiness. It is readiness. Anyone who has watched a cat hunt understands the strange compression of time before it leaps. Egyptians knew that moment well. They lived close enough to animals to recognize their habits with precision. Their artists captured not only the bodies of creatures, but their roles in the human imagination. Birds explode from marsh reeds, cattle strain under labor crocodiles, wait in water, and cats sit as if they have always known more than they reveal. That quiet mystery became part of their sacred appeal. At the same time, the worship of cats was never only personal. It became institutional. Temples, priesthoods, festivals, economies, pilgrimage routes, votive offerings, and animal cemeteries all shaped the later history of the sacred cat. By the first millennium BCE, especially cat devotion becomes visible on a massive scale. At sites associated with Bastet, such as Bubastis in the eastern Nile Delta, worshippers participate in festivals that ancient writers later describe as crowded, noisy, musical, and unusually free in atmosphere. People dedicate cat statuettes, amulets, and mummified cats. Some of these offerings likely express sincere devotion. Others belong to a temple economy where sacred objects are produced, purchased, and deposited in huge numbers. The archaeological record reveals both reverence and discomfort. Many cat mummies contain young animals, sometimes deliberately killed for votive use. This fact complicates any sentimental picture of Egyptian cat worship. Devotion in the ancient world could be tender, but it could also be organized, commercial, and violent by modern standards. That contradiction is part of the story, not an exception to it. Ancient Egypt often holds together things modern people prefer to separate. Love and sacrifice, beauty and death, sacred care and ritual killing, household affection, and temple industry can exist within the same religious system. To say Egyptians worshipped cats does not mean every cat lived a pampered life, or that every act done in a cat's name was gentle. It means cats occupied a charged symbolic position, one powerful enough to shape behavior law, art, pilgrimage, myth, and burial practice. It means the animal that once slipped into granaries after mice eventually entered the language of eternity. And still at the center of the story there remains that small body moving at dawn. The temples and myths come later. The foreign astonishment comes later. The modern museum cases full of bronze cat figures and linen-wrapped mummies come later. First there is a settlement along the Nile, a store of grain, a dark corner, a threat almost too small to dramatize, and a hunter whose usefulness becomes impossible to ignore. In a civilization obsessed with preserving order against chaos, the cat performs a daily miracle at human scale. It makes the home safer. It guards the food that carries a family through the season. It kills what comes silently in the night. From such ordinary acts, reverence can grow slowly until the boundary between animal and symbol becomes thin, and the creature beneath the chair begins to look like the shadow of a goddess. The bargain between Egyptians and cats does not begin with worship. It begins with hunger storage and the strange new problems created when human beings learn how to keep food in one place. For most of deep human history, food moves through the world with the seasons. Plants ripen and vanish. Herds pass through grasslands. Fish gather and scatter. Hunters and gatherers follow, adapt, remember, and move. But farming changes the rhythm of survival. Grain can be planted, harvested, dried, measured, taxed, and stored. It can wait. It can carry a village through a dry season. Feed workers, supply temples, support armies, and turn the uncertain generosity of nature into something that looks almost like control. Yet stored grain also creates a signal in the landscape. To humans it means security. To rodents, insects, birds, and thieves it means opportunity. Every basket of barley, every sealed jar, every mud brick granary is a small fortress under siege. In the Nile Valley this problem becomes central. The river's annual flood makes agriculture possible on a scale that can sustain one of the ancient world's most durable civilizations, but the harvest does not protect itself. Once cut from the field, grain becomes vulnerable. Mice and rats can breed quickly in the warmth of human settlements. They gnaw through baskets, contaminate stores, and consume what families have labored months to produce. In a world without modern poisons, sealed metal containers, or industrial pest control, the battle against rodents is constant, intimate, and exhausting. A household may survive not because it produces enough grain once, but because it manages to defend that grain day after day. This is the unglamorous foundation beneath kingship temples, painted tombs, and divine myths. Egypt's grandeur rests in part on thousands of quiet struggles against small teeth in the dark. The African wildcat is perfectly suited to enter this struggle. It is not a lion reduced in size, though later symbolism will link the whole feline family in powerful ways. It is a desert-edge predator, lean, patient, and extremely efficient. Its coat blends with dry grasses and earth. Its ears catch slight movement. Its body can remain still long enough for prey to forget it is there. It does not need humans to survive, but human settlements make hunting easier by concentrating prey. The cat approaches because the village is useful. The village permits the cat because the cat is useful. Out of that mutual usefulness comes one of the most important animal relationships in human history, and one of the strangest, because cats are never domesticated in quite the same way as cattle, sheep, goats, or dogs. They remain themselves. This matters deeply. Dogs enter human life through pack behavior cooperation, guarding hunting and social bonding that can be directed by people. Cattle and sheep enter through control of breeding movement, milk meat hides, and labor. Cats enter as tolerated hunters. They do not pull plows. They do not carry loads. They do not accept hierarchy with the same clarity as dogs. Their value lies in a narrower but essential function. They make human settlements less vulnerable to pests. Because of that, early domestication may not have required the same forceful human control seen with other animals. The cats that stayed nearest people were probably those less fearful of human presence, more willing to hunt around houses, and perhaps more successful at raising kittens in the semi-sheltered spaces settlements provided. Over generations, a population of cats comfortable around humans could emerge without anyone sitting down to invent the house cat. The evidence remains incomplete, but the logic is persuasive. Humans did not so much capture the cat as create a world the cat found profitable. There is lesser-known irony here. Agriculture, often treated as humanity's triumph over nature, also creates new dependencies on animals that humans cannot fully command. Farmers may clear fields, dig canals, build granaries, and organize labor, yet they still need predators. They need owls, snakes, and cats, even if some of those creatures frighten them. The cat becomes valuable because it belongs partly to the wild order that farming tries to hold at a distance. It brings wild skill into the human zone without becoming completely tame. This is one reason cats lend themselves so easily to sacred thought. They are close, but not absorbed. They sit by the hearth, but carry the desert in their muscles. They accept food from human hands, then vanish into darkness where human eyes fail. Such an animal is not merely owned, it is negotiated with. Ancient Egyptians were observant negotiators of the living world. Their art shows a striking sensitivity to animals, not because every image is naturalistic in the modern scientific sense, but because Egyptian artists understood behavior. They watched birds rise from papyrus thickets, cattle lower their heads, monkeys steal fruit, crocodiles wait with terrible patience, and cats focus on prey with that particular frozen intensity known to anyone who has lived beside them. These observations are not incidental. Egyptian religion grows in a landscape where animal behavior reveals patterns of power. A beetle rolling a ball of dung can become associated with solar rebirth. A falcon crossing the sky can express kingship and vision. A cobra rearing to strike can become royal fire. A cat hunting among stores can become the form of protection brought near enough to touch. Long before cat worship becomes formal, there must have been countless unrecorded moments of recognition. A family discovers that the grain lasts longer when a cat frequents the courtyard. A mother notices fewer rodents near a sleeping child. A farmer sees a snake killed or driven back. A scribe working by lamplight hears movement, then silence, then sees the cat emerge with prey. These are not myths yet, but myths often begin as repeated experience arranged into meaning. The Egyptians did not need abstract theology to feel gratitude toward a creature that defended the boundary between safety and loss. Over time, that gratitude could become affection. Affection could become symbolism. Symbolism could become ritual. Ritual could become institution. The path is slow, but it is not mysterious in the sense of being irrational. It is mysterious because practical life and sacred imagination grow together so seamlessly that later evidence cannot always separate them. The domestic setting is essential here. In many ancient cultures, power is imagined in large animals, bulls, lions, eagles, horses, serpents. Egypt has all of these and more, but the cat's rise depends on its presence inside everyday human space. It is small enough to enter rooms, sleep under chairs, brush against legs, and appear in intimate scenes of family life. Tomb paintings often show cats near women beneath seats, or close to feasting and household abundance. Such images do not prove that every cat was pampered in a modern pet-owning sense, but they do suggest closeness. The cat is not only outside the settlement killing pests, it is inside the social and emotional architecture of the home. That intimacy changes everything. A lioness may be feared from a distance. A cat can be loved in the room where one eats, sleeps, gives birth, mourns, and dreams. Still, it is important not to flatten the story into a sweet tale of ancient pet keeping. The first feline bargain is shaped by usefulness, not sentiment alone. Cats likely remained semi-independent for a long time. Some may have been fed, others simply haunted houses and granaries because prey was abundant. Some may have been cherished, others tolerated. Some may have been named, others remained part of the background ecology of settlement life. Scholars still debate the timing and character of cat domestication in Egypt because the evidence is scattered across bones art texts and later religious practice. What can be said with confidence is that Egypt becomes one of the great centers in which the domestic cat gains visibility, symbolic depth, and eventually sacred status. The process is not sudden. It is cumulative, built from daily proximity. One clue to that gradual process lies in the way Egyptian religion handles scale. A small act can reflect a cosmic pattern. The sun god's nightly struggle against chaos is enormous, but the same idea can be mirrored in a household resisting snakes, disease, hunger, and darkness. A cat killing a serpent near the home can echo divine violence against cosmic enemies. A cat protecting grain can participate symbolically in the maintenance of Mat. This does not mean every farmer consciously thinks in theological formulas whenever a cat catches a mouse. It means the culture provides a language in which practical defense can be understood as sacred defense. The home is not outside religion. Food storage is not outside religion. Fertility, childbirth, pest control, health, and sleep all belong to a world where seen and unseen forces overlap. The cat's body itself seems made for this overlap. Its eyes catch light in darkness, producing an eerie glow that ancient observers surely noticed. Its pupils narrow in bright sun and widen at night, giving its face a changing, almost lunar or solar quality depending on the moment. It cleans itself with ritual-looking care. It moves silently, then erupts with precision. It can appear lazy for hours and become lethal in an instant. It gives birth to litters, linking it naturally to fertility and abundance. It purrs a sound felt as much as heard intimate and calming. Yet it also scratches, bites, and kills with no apology. No single explanation fully accounts for the symbolic force of the cat, because the animal itself gathers contradictions in a compact form. It is gentle and violent, domestic and wild, visible and secretive, dependent and independent. In Egypt, contradictions often make a sacred image stronger rather than weaker. The divine is not expected to be simple. A goddess can be motherly and destructive. A protector can bring plague. A healer can carry weapons. A joyful festival can honor a power once feared as a raging lioness. The cat fits this religious imagination because it never offers only one meaning. In the beginning, people may welcome it for the most practical of reasons. But as generations pass, the animal becomes woven into the way Egyptians think about protection, especially protection that does not announce itself loudly. The cat guards without marching. It defends without official command. It keeps watch in the spaces where danger is small enough to be missed until it is too late. This is the first feline bargain, not worship in its final form, not temple ritual, not bronze statues or linen-wrapped offerings, but coexistence shaped by mutual benefit. Humans provide the conditions that attract prey and shelter. Cats provide their hunting. Neither side signs a contract, yet both are changed. The wildcat becomes more comfortable beside people. People become more willing to see the wildcat as part of the household world. And in a civilization where household survival, agricultural order, and divine protection are never entirely separate, that bargain becomes the seed of reverence. The sacred cat of Egypt does not descend suddenly from heaven. It walks in from the edge of the fields following the mice. Once the cat crosses from the granary into the home, its meaning begins to change. A useful animal can remain outside valued but distant, like an ox in a field or a donkey on a road. A sacred animal can be painted on temple walls and approached through ritual. But the cat occupies a more intimate territory. It comes near the sleeping mat, the cooking hearth, the storage jars, the woven baskets, the low stools, the linen chest, the shaded corner where a woman sits grinding grain or nursing a child. Its paws touch the dust of the courtyard and the cool floor of the inner room. It shares the human house without fully belonging to human command. This is where its power deepens, because ancient Egyptian domestic life is not a private world empty of religion. The home is a small fortress against hunger, illness, misfortune, insects, snakes, bad dreams, and the invisible forces that might slip in through a door left unguarded. To modern eyes, the grand religious life of Egypt seems to belong mostly to temples, stone pylons, sacred lakes, incense hymns, priests' statues hidden in dark sanctuaries. But most Egyptians never stand at the center of royal ritual. Their daily religious life is closer, smaller, and more practical. It lives in amulets, household shrines, protective images, birth magic, healing spells, ancestor remembrance, and gestures repeated because the world feels safer when they are done. A mother worried for her child, a farmer worried about the harvest, a family worried about sickness in the night. These are not minor concerns outside the sacred order. They are the human edge of Ma'at, the fragile balance that must be preserved not only in heaven but in rooms of mud, brick, and reed. The cat fits naturally into this household religion because it is both a presence and a watcher. It does not merely pass through the home, it studies it. A cat notices what humans miss: movement under baskets, a flicker beside the wall, a scent near the threshold. Ancient people living without electric light know darkness differently from modern people. Night is not just an absence of light, it is an active condition. It changes the house. It hides scorpions, snakes, rodents, thieves, fever, and fear. Oil lamps push back only a small circle of flame. Beyond that circle, a room can become uncertain. In such a world, an animal that sees and hunts in darkness carries emotional force. Even before anyone calls it divine, it behaves like a guardian of the unseen. This guardianship is practical, but it is also psychological. The sound of a cat moving through a room may have reassured people in ways that leave little trace in archaeology. Written records rarely preserve the ordinary comfort of having an alert animal nearby, yet Tumart hints at closeness. Cats appear beneath chairs, especially near women in scenes of feasting, music, and domestic abundance. They are sometimes shown with collars, sometimes eating or catching birds, sometimes seated with composed dignity. These images are not snapshots in the modern sense. Egyptian art arranges the world as it should endure. To include a cat near the human body, close to furniture, food, fragrance, and family, is to place it inside an idealized domestic order. What survives in the record suggests that cats were not merely tolerated in the house. They became part of how a good, protected, prosperous home could be imagined. One of the surprising details in Egyptian tomb scenes is the cat's repeated association with women's spaces and feminine imagery. This does not mean cats belonged only to women, nor that men ignored them. But the pattern is meaningful. Women in elite tomb art are often shown with perfumes, lotus flowers, fine linen jewelry, music, and fertility symbolism. The cat appears within this visual world near elegance, but also near protection. It is graceful and sensual, but it is also a hunter. It can sit beneath the chair of a woman at a banquet, a quiet shadow under pleasure and beauty, reminding the viewer that delight and defense are not separate. In Egyptian thought, fertility must be protected. Motherhood is powerful but dangerous. Birth is hopeful but risky. Children are beloved but vulnerable. A creature linked to reproduction, domestic warmth and sudden violence can become an ideal emblem for guarding the fragile continuities of family life. The household cat also belongs to food preparation, and food in Egypt always carries more than nutritional meaning. Bread and beer are staples of life. Grain is labor made edible. Offerings of bread, beer, meat, vegetables, and fruit sustain the dead in tomb belief and nourish the gods in temple ritual. The same substances that feed a family also appear in religious economy. Therefore, a creature that protects grain indirectly protects offerings, ancestors, and divine exchange. No single explanation fully accounts for Egypt's devotion to cats, but the connection between food security and sacred continuity is hard to ignore. To defend the storehouse is to defend the future. To keep rodents from grain is to keep hunger from the door and disorder from the family line. This is why the home itself can be understood almost like a miniature Egypt. Outside lies desert uncertainty and the forces that threaten cultivated order. Inside lies a protected zone of food, kinship, sleep, fertility, memory, and ritual. The threshold between them matters. Ancient Egyptians use images and objects to defend thresholds, protective deities, knives in magical scenes, amulets, symbols, words of power. The cat, though living and unpredictable, acts in a similar space. It patrols borders, it crosses doorways, it slips between courtyard and room, field edge and sleeping place. It is never fixed in one category. That movement makes it symbolically useful because danger also moves. A snake does not announce itself. A mouse does not ask permission. Misfortune does not always arrive through the front entrance. The guardian must be able to follow it through cracks. There is also the matter of affection, which is harder to measure but impossible to exclude. Archaeology can count bones, catalogue mummies, describe bronzes, and analyze paintings, but it struggles to capture the emotional texture of life with animals. Yet anyone who lives closely with cats knows that usefulness alone rarely explains the bond. Cats create habits around themselves. They choose sleeping places. They demand food. They curl us against warmth. They become associated with particular rooms, people, times of day, and moods. In a society where family continuity and household stability are central values, such familiarity can become meaningful. Egyptians named animals, depicted them carefully, and sometimes buried cherished creatures. The evidence remains incomplete, but it is reasonable to infer that many cats were not anonymous pest control devices. Some were companions, and companionship has a sacred potential of its own. A lesser-known side of this relationship is that the cat's cleanliness may have mattered. Egyptian culture places great emphasis on purity washing, grooming, linen, scent, and bodily presentation, especially in ritual contexts. Cats, with their constant self-cleaning, would have appeared unusually orderly compared with many animals. They bury waste, maintain their coats, and move with contained precision. Modern people often romanticize this, but ancient observers surely noticed it. The cat's clean habits could have reinforced its suitability for domestic and sacred association. It was not a scavenger rooting noisily through filth in the same way as some settlement animals. It seemed composed, almost deliberate, as if it participated in the household's desire for order. Yet the cat's place in the home is not only soft and graceful, it is also a reminder that violence protects peace. A sleeping child and a dead mouse belong to the same domestic story. A full grain jar and a hunting animal with blood on its mouth are connected. Egyptian religion does not shy away from such truths. Protection often requires force. Goddesses who defend mothers and children may also carry knives. Deities who heal may also repel demons. The cat's violence is small-scale, but it is relentless and precise. It does not wage battle like a king in a chariot. It eliminates the hidden intruder. That kind of protection may have felt especially relevant to ordinary households where the greatest threats were often not armies but illness, pests, venom, hunger, and bad luck. The home also gives the cat a role in memory. Tomb scenes are designed to preserve an ideal existence beyond death. When a cat is shown beneath a chair or near a hunting scene, it becomes part of the deceased person's eternal environment. This suggests that the animal's presence was desirable not merely in life, but in the imagined continuation of life. The afterlife Egyptians hoped for was not an abstract heaven detached from earthly pleasures. It included fields, food, music, family servants, boats, gardens, fragrance, and familiar comforts. A cat could belong in that world because it already belonged in the best version of this one. Its image helped make eternity feel inhabited. Still, scholars debate how directly these domestic images connect to formal cat worship. A painted cat in a tomb does not automatically mean the household worshipped that individual animal. A beloved pet is not the same as a goddess. A useful hunter is not the same as a cult statue. But Egyptian culture allows meanings to accumulate. The same animal can be practical, affectionate, symbolic, magical, and divine, depending on context. This accumulation is precisely what makes the cat so powerful. It can live under a chair and still point toward Bastet. It can catch a mouse and still echo cosmic protection. It can be fed by a child and still carry the aura of something older than the household. By the time cats become deeply associated with divine protection, the emotional groundwork has already been laid in ordinary rooms. Reverence does not have to begin with fear of a distant force. It can begin with repeated dependence on a familiar one. The cat is there when grain must be guarded, when night feels uncertain, when children sleep, when women gather, when food is prepared, when the house breathes in the heat of the afternoon. It is both comfort and weapon, ornament and sentinel, companion and little predator. It makes the human world feel less exposed. And in Egypt, where the preservation of order is the great labor of gods, kings, priests, farmers and families alike, anything that makes the home less exposed can become more than useful. It can become holy. Bastet does not enter Egyptian religion as the gentle cat goddess modern imagination often expects. Her oldest face is sharper, hotter, closer to the lioness than to the animal sleeping beneath a household chair. In the deep layers of Egyptian belief, feline power first appears in forms that are dangerous before they are comforting. The great cats of the desert edge, especially lionesses, stand for royal violence, solar heat, sudden punishment, and the fierce protection of sacred order. They are beautiful but not safe. They are maternal but not mild. They guard by destroying what threatens the world. Bastet belongs to this older feline atmosphere, and her transformation over time is one of the most revealing clues to why Egyptians came to worship cats with such intensity. She shows how a civilization can take the terror of the lioness and slowly bring it into the home without ever fully removing its claws. In earlier periods, Bastet is often linked with Lower Egypt and with royal protection. Her main cult center, Bubastis, lies in the eastern Nile Delta, a region of waterways, fields, marshes and routes that connect Egypt to the wider Near East. This location matters. The delta is fertile but open, rich, but vulnerable, a place where trade, migration, invasion, and cultural exchange pass through more readily than in the narrow valley farther south. A protective goddess rooted there carries both local and national significance. She guards not merely one house or one town, but a frontier-like world of movement and exposure. What survives in the record suggests that Bastet's identity was never frozen. Like many Egyptian deities, she changes through centuries of political shifts, theological blending artistic convention and popular devotion. Her name is often rendered as Bastet, though older forms such as Bast also appear. The final sound in Bastet may reflect later linguistic development, or a way of marking the goddess grammatically, and scholars still debate aspects of the name's exact origin and meaning. What is clearer is that she becomes associated with a jar of ointment or perfume in some interpretations, and this connection suits her later identity. Fragrance, pleasure, bodily care, music, sexuality, and festive joy gather around her cult. Yet this softer atmosphere should not mislead us. Egyptian goddesses do not become powerful by becoming harmless. Bastet's gentleness is layered over an older capacity for wrath. Her perfume does not erase her weapons. Her music does not silence the memory of the lioness. This duality is essential. In Egyptian religion, fierce goddesses are often understood as protectors whose anger must be honored, cooled, redirected, or appeased. The same power that can bring plague can also ward it off. The same fire that burns enemies can defend a child. Bastet's changing face belongs to this wider pattern. She is related in theme and sometimes in theological association to other formidable goddesses such as Sekhmet, the lioness of destructive solar force, and Hathor, who can be loving, erotic, musical, maternal, and also terrifying in certain myths. These divine figures are not simple personalities, they are fields of power. They overlap, separate, merge, and reflect one another depending on time, place, and ritual need. No single explanation fully accounts for every local version of Bastet because Egyptian religion is not a fixed handbook. It is a living system across millennia. As the domestic cat becomes more prominent in Egyptian life, Bastet's image shifts toward a smaller feline form. This does not mean Egyptians forgot the lioness. Rather, they discovered that feline sacredness could operate at another scale. The lioness is the desert's visible terror, the royal predator, the blazing eye of divine anger. The house cat is quieter, closer, more intimate, but it carries the same basic grammar of power, watchfulness, speed, motherhood, predation, and independence. When Bastet becomes depicted as a woman with the head of a cat, or as a seated cat adorned with jewelry, she is not reduced. She is domesticated in the deepest symbolic sense, brought near to human life while still retaining divine charge. The goddess has entered the room. That transformation mirrors the cultural journey of cats themselves. The wild hunter at the edge of settlement becomes a household guardian. The household guardian becomes an image of divine protection. The divine protector becomes a goddess of music, fertility, pleasure, and joy. At each stage the meaning expands rather than replaces what came before. A cat may guard grain, but grain supports the family. The family depends on fertility. Fertility needs protection. Protection requires ferocity. Ferocity must be balanced with joy if life is to be worth preserving. Bastet gathers all of these threads into a single figure. She is not simply the goddess of cats. She is the goddess who reveals why cats mattered. In later Egyptian art, Bastet often appears with attributes that seem almost festive. She may hold a sistrum, the sacred rattle associated with music and ritual sound, especially in cults connected to goddesses such as Hathor. She may carry an aegis, a protective collar-like emblem, or be accompanied by kittens. Bronze statues show her seated as a cat, sometimes with earrings, necklaces, or an inscribed base. These objects are elegant, but they are not merely decorative. They belong to a world of offerings, prayers, and divine negotiation. A person dedicating an image of Bastet may seek fertility, health protection, safe childbirth, sexual vitality, household security, or the favour of a goddess whose moods must be respected. The evidence remains incomplete because many dedications have lost their original contexts, but the sheer quantity of surviving cat-related objects suggests devotion that was broad, durable, and emotionally charged. One lesser-known detail is the role of sound in Bastet's worship. The sistrum is not just a musical instrument in the ordinary sense. Its shaking produces a bright, rattling noise that could be understood as pleasing to deities, driving away hostile forces and creating an atmosphere of sacred energy. In a culture attentive to rhythm, speech, chant, and ritual performance, sound is action. Bastet's association with music links her to joy, but also to protection through ordered vibration, through the human effort to fill space with sacred presence. A festival of Bastet is not quiet, private reverence. It is movement intoxication, boats, crowds, laughter offerings, and music rising from bodies gathered in devotion. To worship her is to enter a charged atmosphere where pleasure and piety do not stand opposed. This is one reason foreign observers found Egyptian animal cults so striking. To Greek and Roman writers, Egyptian reverence for cats could appear excessive, exotic, even absurd. They sometimes describe Egyptians mourning animals, punishing those who harmed cats, or giving enormous attention to creatures other cultures might treat as ordinary. These accounts must be handled carefully. Outsiders often misunderstood Egyptian religion, or shaped their descriptions to entertain their own audiences. Yet even through distortion they preserve a real impression. Cats in Egypt held a status that demanded public seriousness. They were not casual animals. They belonged to a divine network, and harming them could be perceived as more than property damage. It could be sacrilege, a rupture in the relationship between human society and protective power. Bastet's rise also reveals a shift in religious focus toward accessible divine intimacy. The great state gods of Egypt, such as Amun-Ra or Ptah or Osiris, loom across temple systems and royal ideology. But people also need deities who feel close to their bodies and households. They need protection at childbirth, comfort in sickness, hope for fertility, pleasure in celebration, defense against invisible harm. Bastet offers that closeness without losing grandeur. She can be approached through small objects, votive offerings, amulets, and local worship. A bronze cat figure may sit in a shrine or be deposited at a temple, carrying the prayer of someone whose name is now gone. The scale is modest, but the longing behind it is immense. The changing face of Bastet is therefore not a decline from wild power into domestic softness. It is a religious achievement. Egyptian thought manages to preserve danger while making it intimate. The goddess who once stands near the heat of lioness protection becomes the guardian of perfume jars, music, fertility, and the household. Her cat face does not make her trivial. It makes her available. A lioness goddess may defend the king and cosmic order. A cat goddess can defend the bedchamber, the pregnancy, the child, the grain jar, the festival crowd, the emotional center of ordinary life. She carries divine force into spaces where most people actually live. Yet Bastet remains difficult to define completely, because she's both a goddess and a mirror of Egyptian society's changing needs. In times when royal protection and dangerous borders dominate imagination, her fiercer aspects matter. In periods when popular religion, household devotion, and temple pilgrimage expand, her gentler and more festive aspect flourish. In art she may look serene, almost decorative, but serenity in Egyptian divine imagery often conceals force. The seated cat is composed because it does not need to display its power constantly. It waits, it watches. It belongs to a goddess whose anger has been cooled into guardianship but not erased. And so the story that began with cats following mice into human settlements now rises into theology. The practical hunter becomes part of a divine form that can bless fertility, protect mothers, delight in music, and guard against danger. Bastet's changing face shows why Egyptians worshipped cats not as a strange, isolated habit, but as part of a larger way of seeing the world. The animal in the home and the goddess in the temple are connected by the same logic order, must be protected by powers that understand both tenderness and violence. The cat does, Bastet does, and in ancient Egypt that was enough to make the creature beneath the chair shine with sacred possibility. The house cat may have carried sacred power into the rooms of ordinary life, but behind it stands a much older and more dangerous feline shadow. Egypt's love of cats cannot be understood without the lioness. Long before bronze statues of elegant seated cats filled temple deposits, before pilgrims carried votive mummies to Bastet, before cats became icons of household protection, Egyptian imagination had already learned to see feline power in the desert's great predator. The lioness belonged to the margins to heat distance blood and royal force. She did not curl beneath a chair. She did not wait beside a grain jar. She ruled the borderlands where cultivated Egypt met the wild, and because Egypt always defined itself against the threat of chaos beyond its ordered fields, the lioness became one of the most intense images through which divine protection could be imagined. The Nile Valley is a narrow world pressed between deserts. Its fields are green because the river allows them to be green, but beyond that band of cultivation lies a harsher country of cliffs, sand, dry wind, and predators. To the Egyptian mind, the desert is not simply empty space. It is the place outside the reliable order of irrigation, harvest, village, and temple. It can produce minerals, trade routes, and sacred solitude, but it also represents danger, exile, foreignness, and disorder. Lions once lived in regions connected to Egypt and its surrounding landscapes, and even where actual encounters were not everyday experiences for most people, the idea of the lion carried enormous force. The lioness especially embodied violence with purpose. She hunts, she feeds young, she defends territory. She's not chaotic in the sense of random destruction, yet to any creature caught in her path she's overwhelming. This is why lioness goddesses occupy such an important place in Egypt's religious imagination. Sekhmet is perhaps the most famous, the powerful one, a goddess of war, plague, burning heat, and healing. Her name itself carries the sense of power. She can unleash illness, but she can also be invoked against illness. She can destroy enemies of the sun god, but her fury can threaten the very world she's meant to protect. In one famous mythic pattern, a raging goddess must be pacified before her violence consumes humanity. The details vary across traditions, but the idea is unmistakable. Divine protection is terrifying when it is not restrained. The same force that preserves order can become catastrophic if allowed to burn without measure. Scholars still debate how different local traditions of fierce goddesses influenced one another, but the broader pattern is clear. Egypt did not imagine safety as softness. Safety required controlled danger. Bastet shares in this feline field of meaning even as her later cat form becomes more domestic and approachable. She is not isolated from Sekhmet, Hathor, Mut, Tefnut, Pakhet, and other goddesses who carry lioness, solar, or protective qualities. Egyptian theology often allows divine powers to overlap, merge, split, and echo. One goddess may become the Eye of Ra, the fiery feminine force sent out to punish enemies or defend the sun. Another may soothe, heal, or delight. Another may stand as a mother. These are not always sharply separated beings in the modern sense. They are divine roles, faces, and intensities. The feline body becomes a way to express them because it combines beauty, speed, patience, and violence in a form that feels both natural and supernatural. The solar connection is especially important. Egypt's religion is built around the daily drama of the sun rising, crossing the sky. setting, passing through the dangerous night and returning. This cycle is cosmic, political, agricultural, and personal all at once. The sun gives life, but its heat can also kill. In Egypt, sunlight is blessing and threat, harvest and desert glare. Lioness goddesses belong to this double nature. They can be the burning eye of the sun god, the flame that strikes enemies, the heat that brings fever, the force that must be appeased so life can continue. A domestic cat lying in sunlight may seem far removed from Sekhmet's blazing wrath, but Egyptian thought is comfortable with scales. The small animal basking in the sun still belongs to the feline grammar of light, warmth, watchfulness, and sudden movement. The household cat is a cooled ember of a larger fire. A striking image from Egyptian religious tradition shows a great cat defeating a serpent, often connected with the sun god's struggle against Apophis, the monstrous serpent of chaos. In some scenes, a cat cuts or attacks the serpent near a sacred tree, an image that may seem surprising to anyone, expecting cats to remain in the realm of domestic charm. But this image reveals the deeper logic. The cat is not only a pet-like creature associated with comfort. It can stand for cosmic defense. It can become the small, precise killer of the force that threatens dawn itself. The serpent Apophis represents the anti-order that tries to halt the solar cycle, swallowing light, stopping renewal, dragging the world back toward non-existence. When a cat is shown defeating such a serpent, feline predation becomes cosmic theology. The animal that kills snakes near the house echoes the divine power that protects the sun. This connection between the domestic and the cosmic is not accidental. Egyptians repeatedly translate ordinary experience into sacred pattern. The farmer sees the river return and understands renewal. The mourner sees seeds buried and rising and thinks of resurrection. The household sees a cat kill a snake and recognizes protection in its most immediate form. From there, myth can widen the image until the snake is no longer merely a snake, but chaos itself, and the cat is no longer merely a household hunter, but a divine defender. No single explanation fully accounts for the sacred cat, but this habit of symbolic enlargement explains how practical observation becomes religious imagination without losing contact with reality. Lioness gods also carry royal meaning. Pharaoh is not merely an administrator in Egyptian ideology. He is the defender of Maat, the human figure who maintains cosmic and social order. Royal imagery often emphasizes domination of enemies, control of borders, and victory over chaos. Lions and lionesses fit naturally into this language. A king may be compared to a lion in strength, or shown trampling foes with animal ferocity. Protective goddesses may defend him, crown him, nurse him, or destroy his enemies. The feline body then belongs not only to households and temples, but to kingship itself. Its force helps imagine the state's capacity to strike. The gentle cat of later domestic devotion carries in miniature a prestige inherited from these larger predators of royal and divine violence. There is a lesser-known goddess named Pakhet, whose name is often interpreted in relation to scratching or tearing, and who was associated with the desert margins and wild hunting power. Her cult site at Beni Hassan was later called by Greeks the Spios Artemidos, the Cave of Artemis, because foreign observers associated her with their own huntress goddess. Pakhet's presence reminds us that feline divinity in Egypt is not one simple line from lioness to house cat. It is a web of local cults, regional landscapes, desert shrines, hunting symbolism, royal patronage, and theological adaptation. The evidence remains incomplete, especially for earlier periods and local practices, but figures like Pakhet show how deeply feline danger was embedded in Egyptian sacred geography. The cat in the house is only one branch of a much larger tree. The lioness also helps explain why Egyptian cat worship could embrace tenderness without becoming sentimental. Modern viewers often isolate Bastet as a benign goddess of cats, music and motherhood, then treat Sekhmet as her opposite, a goddess of violence and plague. Egyptian religion is more fluid than that. Gentleness and ferocity belong together because life requires both. A mother who protects a child may need the heart of a lioness. A healer must confront disease as an enemy. A household goddess must be able to repel what threatens the household. Music can soothe divine rage, but the rage must exist first for the soothing to matter. Bastet's warmth is powerful precisely because it has a fierce ancestry. She is not beloved because she's harmless. She's beloved because her danger has turned toward protection. This is why feline goddesses can be associated with both plague and healing. To modern thinking, these categories may seem contradictory. A deity should either cause harm or cure it. But in Egyptian thought, control over a force includes the ability to send it and withdraw it. The goddess who brings fever may also be the one who prevents fever. The lioness who slaughters enemies may also protect the king's body. The cat who kills disease-bearing rodents may become associated indirectly with health. Ancient people did not know germ theory in the modern sense, but they knew that pests rot bites and contamination threatened life. They knew that unseen forces could move through a household. Feline protection, whether imagined as a lioness goddess or a cat beneath the bed, operated in that anxious territory where the visible and invisible overlap. The solar fury of lioness goddesses also carries emotional truth. Egypt's sun is life-giving, but it is not gentle. Fields need warmth, but crops can fail under extremes. Bodies need daylight, but desert heat can kill travelers. The same sun that crowns the temple with gold can turn stone too hot to touch. Feline divinity captures this double nature. The lioness rests under the sun and hunts with lethal certainty. The cat's eyes narrow in brightness and widen in darkness. Both seem to belong to cycles of light and shadow. Bastet's later festivals of music and intoxication may appear far from the burning rage of Sekhmet, yet they are part of the same religious necessity. Powerful heat must be cooled. Dangerous energy must be transformed into joy, and divine force must be brought into balance. So the worship of cats in Egypt is not a small curiosity attached to a fondness for pets. It is rooted in a vast symbolic field where feline beings guard the sun, defend kings, repel serpents, protect homes, threaten enemies, heal disease, and embody the controlled violence necessary for order to survive. The domestic cat becomes sacred not by replacing the lioness, but by making lioness power intimate. Its small body carries an echo of desert heat and royal defense. Its quiet eyes belong to a family of divine watchers. Its claws, hidden until needed, express one of Egypt's oldest truths: peace is never passive. It must be guarded sometimes by colossal goddesses blazing with solar fire, and sometimes by a silent hunter waiting in the dark beside a jar of grain. The cat's sacred power grows stronger because it never belongs entirely to one side of any boundary. It is domestic but not fully obedient. It is wild but willing to sleep near human warmth. It is gentle enough to be held, yet dangerous enough to kill. It moves through daylight with lazy composure, then becomes a creature of night eyes, widened body-low senses sharpened toward things people cannot see. Ancient Egypt is a civilization intensely aware of thresholds, the border between field and desert life, and death, purity and pollution, order and chaos, the living village and the necropolis beyond the cultivated land. The cat seems made for such a world. It is a boundary keeper, not because it stands still like a guard at a gate, but because it crosses the gate constantly and survives on both sides. Every Egyptian settlement is a negotiation with edges. The Nile floodplain offers abundance, but it is narrow. Beyond it lies desert, and beyond the desert lie routes of trade, exile, invasion, mining, hunting, and divine danger. Even within the Greenland there are borders everywhere, walls around houses sealed, granaries, temple enclosures, tomb entrances, doorways, riverbanks, irrigation channels, fields, animal pens, sleeping rooms, birthing spaces. Boundaries matter because they create zones of safety. Yet boundaries are never perfect. Mice slip through cracks, snakes slide under thresholds, illness enters the body without visible permission. Bad dreams disturb the sleeper. Death crosses into the house and takes the beloved. A culture that thinks deeply about protection must also think deeply about the things that pass between places. The cat lives exactly in that passage. It patrols the house but is not confined to it. It moves between storage room and courtyard roof and alley field edge and sleeping mat. It can vanish into reeds and return with mud on its paws. It can sit in the sun with the calm of furniture, then suddenly become a streak of muscle under a wall. This mobility gives the cat symbolic force. A guardian that never leaves the protected zone may fail to meet danger where it begins. A creature that crosses thresholds can confront threats before they fully enter. In this sense, the cat's independence becomes part of its value. It is not always where people command it to be. It is where its senses call it. Egyptian religion gives great importance to beings that operate at thresholds. Anubis, the jackal-associated god, belongs to the desert edge and the cemetery guiding and protecting the dead where the living world fades. Bess, a dwarf-like protective figure, appears in domestic contexts, especially around childbirth, music, sexuality, and sleep, guarding vulnerable bodies at dangerous moments. Taweret, with her hippopotamus form, protects pregnancy and birth, standing at the threshold of life itself. Cobras guard crowns, temples, and divine bodies with sudden lethal force. Doorways to tombs and temples are covered with spells, images and names meant to control passage. The cat fits this mental universe not as a formal gatekeeper carved on every entrance, but as a living answer to the same anxiety. It watches what crosses. Night makes this role especially vivid. To modern people, darkness can be erased by a switch. For ancient Egyptians, night has texture and weight. The sun's disappearance is not only a daily fact, it is a cosmic ordeal. The sun god must travel through the underworld facing serpents and hostile beings before dawn can return. Every night is therefore a passage through danger, and every dawn is a victory. In the household, night is smaller but no less real. A family sleeps while threats remain awake. A baby breathes in the dark. Food sits stored. A snake moves because the heat has softened. Rodents search for grain. The cat, half asleep but never entirely absent, belongs to this nocturnal uncertainty. It can act when humans are most vulnerable. His eyes must have seemed extraordinary. The reflective glow of a cat's eyes in low light is a physical fact, but physical facts are precisely what ancient symbolism often begins with. The cat appears to hold light inside darkness. Its pupils change shape dramatically, opening and narrowing with the movement of the sun. It sees what people cannot. This does not mean Egyptians invented a single doctrine of cat vision as supernatural in every context, but the animal's night sight would naturally feed associations with hidden threats and unseen worlds. What survives in the record suggests that cats were valued not only for what they did, but for what they seemed to reveal, a capacity to inhabit darkness without surrendering to it. There is a lesser-known visual theme in Egyptian religious art that deepens this idea: the cat as a defender against the serpent of chaos. When a feline figure attacks a snake associated with Apophis, the enemy of the solar cycle, the image draws together home, night, and cosmos. The household cat killing a snake is not merely an event of pest control. It can become an earthly echo of the sun's defense against annihilation. The serpent threatens passage, the cat restores it. Dawn can come, the house can breathe, the grain can remain, the child can wake. No single explanation fully accounts for this symbolism, but the repetition of feline protection against serpentine danger shows how easily Egyptians could transform observation into theology. The cat also crosses the boundary between affection and awe. Some animals are useful but not intimate, others are feared but not loved. Cats invite both closeness and distance. A person may feed a cat, stroke it, call it into the house, and still know that it cannot be commanded like a servant. This quality matters in a religious culture where divine beings are approached through offerings, praise and ritual, but never truly controlled by humans. The gods may be invited, pleased, appeased, or petitioned, yet they remain other. The cat's social behavior offers a small domestic analogy. It may accept human attention but on its own terms. It may sit beside a person then leave without explanation. It gives the impression of consent rather than submission. For people sensitive to divine presence in animal forms, that independence could only increase its aura. This boundary-crossing identity may help explain why cats are so often linked with women, fertility, and household protection, without becoming limited to one domestic meaning. Birth itself is a threshold event, dangerous and sacred. A child passes from hidden interior life into the exposed world. The mother passes through pain and risk. The household waits between hope and grief. Ancient Egyptian birth magic surrounds this threshold with protective figures, amulets, spells, music, and divine names. Bastet's later connection with fertility and motherhood belongs naturally here. The cat, prolific, watchful, warm with kittens, yet violently defensive when threatened, provides a living image of protected reproduction. Scholars still debate how direct the connections were in different periods and regions, but the symbolic fit is unmistakable. At the same time, the cat's liminal nature extends toward death. Egyptian tombs are not simply places where bodies are stored. They are carefully constructed thresholds between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Images placed in tombs are meant to endure, activate, nourish, and protect. When cats appear in tomb scenes, or when cats themselves are mummified and buried, they participate in a culture where animals can accompany, represent, or mediate between realms. The mummified cat is especially complex. It may be a votive offering to a goddess, a sacred animal, treated as a vessel of divine power, or in some contexts perhaps a beloved creature honored after death. The evidence remains incomplete, and the motives behind individual burials are often impossible to recover. But the larger pattern shows that cats could cross even the greatest boundary of all. They could enter ritual death and continue to signify protection, devotion, and divine nearness. And this ability to bridge categories helps explain why Egyptian animal religion cannot be reduced to simple zoology. Egyptians did not worship cats only because cats caught mice, any more than they revered scarabs only because beetles roll balls, or falcons only because they fly. Animal behavior became meaningful because it exposed qualities that humans recognized as powerful. The cat's quality is liminality made flesh. It is near and far, soft and sharp, playful and deadly visible, and hidden, domestic, and untamed. It belongs to the house, but also to the alley, the field, the roof, the cemetery edge, the temple court, the mythic night. A civilization that builds its worldview around maintaining order across dangerous boundaries would naturally notice such a creature. The cat's silence adds another layer. Dogs announce danger. Geese shriek. Donkeys bray. Cattle low. Cats often act without proclamation. Their protection can be almost invisible. The mouse is gone. The snake is found dead. The grain remains. The family may not witness the hunt, only the result. This makes the cat an emblem of hidden guardianship, the kind of protection people most desire when threats are subtle. Many dangers in ancient life are hard to see clearly. Fever infection, spoilage, venom, evil intentions, bad luck, hostile spirits. A silent guardian suits a world where danger does not always arrive with noise, yet the same silence can unsettle. Cats watch. They stare at empty corners. They react to faint sounds. They seem aware of presences outside human perception. Modern people often turn this into superstition or humour, but for ancient Egyptians who understood the world as thick with invisible powers, such behaviour may have felt significant. This does not require imagining them as irrational. It requires recognizing that their environment did not divide matter and spirit as sharply as many modern systems do. If a cat noticed what humans missed in ordinary life, perhaps it also noticed what humans missed in sacred life. The inference is not scientific in the modern sense, but it is emotionally and culturally coherent. So the cat becomes a keeper of boundaries because it embodies the art of passage. It defends the line between food and famine home, and intrusion, sleep and danger, fertility and loss, night and dawn, life and death, human and divine. It is not the largest sacred animal in Egypt, nor the strongest, nor the most publicly royal. Its power is subtler. It is the creature of the edge, the thing that walks along walls, slips under doors, waits at thresholds, and turns darkness into hunting ground. In the Egyptian imagination, such a being could never remain merely ordinary for long. The world was full of borders that needed guarding, and the cat crossed them all with luminous eyes and silent feet. The sacred image of the Egyptian cat becomes easier to understand when it's brought back down to the floor of the house, the edge of the field and the dark places where small dangers gather. Behind the goddess, behind the bronze statues and temple offerings, there is the plain fact that cats were useful in a land where survival depended on protecting food. Egypt's religious imagination could lift animals into the divine, but it rarely did so without some root in lived experience. The cat's holiness was not invented in isolation by priests staring at symbols. It grew from repeated encounters with a creature that defended people against some of the most persistent threats in their world: mice, rats, snakes, insects indirectly attracted by spoilage, and the invisible chain of loss that begins when food is no longer safe. The Nile Valley gave Egypt abundance, but abundance creates its own battlefield. Once grain was harvested, threshed, dried, and stored, it had to endure months of vulnerability. Ancient storage was clever, but never perfect. Mud brick granaries, ceramic jars, baskets, sealed rooms, raised platforms, and administrative oversight could reduce risk but not remove it. Rodents are patient enemies. They gnaw, squeeze, nest, multiply, and contaminate. A small opening is enough. A few animals become many. What looks like a minor nuisance can become a serious threat when a household's food supply is measured against the dry months ahead. For villages, estates, temples, and the state itself, stored grain is not just subsistence. It is wealth, wages, taxation offerings, and political power. A rat in a granary is therefore a tiny animal standing at the edge of a large system. This is one reason the cat's practical role could become symbolically enormous. It fought a war humans could not easily win by themselves. A person can set traps, seal holes, beat baskets, sweep floors, and keep watch, but a cat turns the house into a hunting landscape. It works at night when humans sleep. It waits without boredom. It hears faint scratching through walls. It kills not because it has been ordered to, but because killing small animals is its nature. That independence makes it especially valuable. A servant must be assigned. A cat simply hunts. In this sense, the cat protects human order by following its own wild appetite. Ancient Egyptians, attentive to the strange usefulness of animal instincts, could easily see divine pattern in that. The threat was not only economic. Rodents bring contamination. Ancient people may not have understood disease transmission in modern biological terms, but they knew the difference between clean and spoiled food, between safe storage and foul storage, between a household that feels orderly and one overrun by pests. Egyptian culture placed strong emphasis on cleanliness, purity, and the avoidance of decay, especially in ritual settings, but those values also mattered in ordinary life. A cat that reduces vermin helps maintain a cleaner domestic world. It protects the food, but also the feeling that the home remains under control. No single explanation fully accounts for the sacred status of cats. Yet pest control is not a minor background detail. It is one of the deep practical reasons a cat could become emotionally and religiously indispensable. Then there are snakes. The Nile environment with its fields, canals, mud brick buildings, reeds, and warm hiding places is naturally attractive to reptiles. Some snakes are harmless or even helpful in controlling rodents, but venomous snakes were a real danger. Cobras and vipers occupy an important place in Egyptian life and symbolism because they are feared and respected. The cobra can represent royal protection, divine fire, and lethal defense, yet an actual venomous snake near a house or child is not a symbol first. It is a crisis. The cat's willingness to confront snakes adds a more dramatic dimension to its reputation. Cats are not invulnerable, and not every cat wins such encounters, but feline speed, agility, and hunting reflexes make them formidable against smaller snakes. A witnessed killing of a snake would be memorable. Repeated enough times across generations, such events become stories, and stories become meanings. The famous Egyptian image of a cat attacking the serpent enemy of the sun draws its force from this reality. It does not float above life as pure abstraction. It enlarges something people could recognize. A cat kills a snake near the house. A divine cat defeats the cosmic serpent that threatens the sun's rebirth. The pattern is the same at different scales. Egyptian thought often works this way, translating the practical into the cosmic, without stripping away the practical foundation. The battle for grain and safety becomes an echo of the battle for creation itself. The field, the house, the temple, and the underworld all become connected stages on which order resists invasion. A lesser-known detail is that cats may have protected not only grain stores but also written materials and textiles, at least indirectly. Papyrus, linen, leather baskets, and stored goods all suffer when rodents are uncontrolled. In administrative and temple contexts, records mattered. Egypt's bureaucracy depended on writing deliveries, taxes, offerings, labor accounts, legal matters, temple inventories. A mouse chewing through stored food is bad. A mouse damaging documents, cords, seals, or ritual materials can also disrupt order. We should not exaggerate and imagine every archive protected by revered cats, because the evidence remains incomplete. But in a society so dependent on stored organic materials, any predator that reduced gnawing pests had value beyond the kitchen. Birds also complicate the picture. Tomb scenes sometimes show cats in marsh hunting contexts seizing birds among papyrus thickets. These images may combine realism, elite sport, erotic symbolism, fertility imagery, and the pleasures of the afterlife. A cat catching birds is not always simply pest control. Marshes in Egyptian art are charged places lush, noisy, fertile, slightly wild, full of fish birds, papyrus, and sexual symbolism. When a cat appears there, it brings its hunting identity into a scene of abundance. It is part of the living richness of the Nile world, but also a controlling force within it. The cat does not merely guard stored grain. It participates in the larger drama of nature being enjoyed, managed, and symbolically ordered. In the fields, cats would not have been the only predators valued by humans. Owl snakes, mongooses, and other animals also affected pest populations, but the cat's special advantage is its closeness to people. Owls hunt from the air and belong to night skies. Snakes inspire fear even when useful. Mongooses are quick and impressive, but less easily integrated into domestic intimacy. The cat can hunt and then return to the household. It can be tolerated near food, children, and bedding. It becomes visible in a way other pest control animals do not. Practical usefulness alone does not create worship, but practical usefulness joined to familiarity. Beauty and symbolic flexibility can do so over centuries. This is where emotional dependence enters again. A family that loses grain to rodents feels the loss directly. A mother who sees a cat kill something dangerous near her child remembers it. A farmer who notices fewer pests around a favored cat may feed it more often. These experiences create preference. Preference creates care. Care creates attachment. Attachment creates grief when the animal dies. Grief creates burial image, memory, or offering. What begins as pest control can move gradually into a relationship charged with gratitude and affection. Scholars still debate how common individual pet burial was compared with votive animal burial, and the evidence varies by time and place, but the emotional possibility is undeniable. Humans do not need modern ideas of pet ownership to bond with animals that share their daily risks. The state and temples also had reasons to value the cat's protective symbolism. Temples stored enormous quantities of food offerings, ritual equipment, textiles, and written records. They were economic institutions as well as sacred spaces. A goddess linked to feline protection could be meaningful not only to mothers and households, but to temple administrators responsible for preserving wealth and purity. This does not mean Bastet's cult was simply pest control turned into theology. It means the practical and the divine reinforced one another. A temple that honors a cat goddess exists in a society where cats are already recognized as protectors of valuable stores. The symbol works because life has prepared people to understand it. There is also a political layer. Egypt's kingship depends on the claim that the ruler maintains order against chaos. That claim can be expressed through monumental battles, smiting scenes, and cosmic rituals, but it also depends on stable harvests, full granaries, and functioning redistribution. Food security is political legitimacy in material form. If pests threaten grain, they threaten more than household comfort. They threaten the visible success of order. The cat, by guarding stores at the smallest scale, participates symbolically in the same structure the king claims to protect at the larger scale. The cat is not royal in the way a lion is royal, but it belongs to the same ideological chain. Danger must be detected, attacked, and removed so life can continue. Yet the Egyptian cat's practical role should not be romanticized as perfectly benign. Cats themselves are predators. They kill birds and small animals that humans may also value. They can scratch, bite, steal food, disturb offerings, or behave in ways people find inconvenient. Their usefulness is real, but not absolute. Ancient Egyptians surely knew this. Their reverence did not depend on pretending cats were morally pure. In Egyptian religious thought, sacred beings often have troubling sides. Crocodiles are dangerous and still divine in certain contexts. Cobras can kill and still protect kings. The cat's predation is part of its power, not a flaw to be explained away. This balance of benefit and danger is precisely what makes the cat such a strong religious figure. A harmless animal may be loved, but a dangerous, useful animal inspires reverence. The cat's violence is acceptable because it is directed most of the time against threats humans want removed. It turns the wild skill of killing toward domestic survival. In doing so, it becomes a living model of controlled chaos. It is not tame order. It is wildness recruited into order. That idea sits at the heart of much Egyptian symbolism. The world is not preserved by eliminating all danger, but by placing dangerous power in the service of balance. So when Egyptians looked at cats, they saw more than elegance. They saw the survival of grain through the night, the dead mouse near the jar, the snake driven from the child's sleeping place, the sudden leap in the corner of the room, the quiet return of safety after a threat too small or too swift for human hands. The sacred cat was born from these moments as much as from myth. Its divinity rose from the floor upward from practical defense into symbolic force. Long before a worshipper bought a votive cat mummy, or shook a sistrum for Bastet, someone watched a cat emerge from darkness with danger in its mouth, and understood without needing doctrine that the household had been protected. By the time cats enter the temple world, they have already gathered centuries of meaning from houses, fields, granaries, and myths. The temple does not create their sacredness from nothing, it concentrates it. It gives feline power a formal address, a place where offerings can be made, priests can perform rituals, pilgrims can arrive, and devotion can be transformed into objects, prayers, and repeated acts. In a household, a cat may protect grain and sleep in a shaft of sunlight. In a temple, the cat becomes a living symbol, a vessel of divine nearness, a visible sign that the goddess is not confined to an invisible realm. The sacred animal stands at the point where ordinary life and divine presence touch. Egyptian temples are often imagined as public gathering places in the modern sense, but their deepest spaces are restricted, carefully controlled, and ritually charged. The god's image is housed, awakened, purified, dressed, fed, and honored through ceremonies performed by priests. The temple is both a divine residence and an economic institution, with land workers, workshops, storerooms, animals, kitchens, archives, and networks of supply. Within this system, sacred animals occupy a special place. Some are singular living manifestations chosen by marks or tradition, like the Apis bull at Memphis. Others are associated with broader cult practices, breeding dedication, and votive offering. Cats connected with Bastet belong especially to this second world where devotion becomes widespread, repeatable, and eventually massive. The most famous center of Bastet's worship is Bubastis, known in Egyptian as Per Bastet the House, or Domain of Bastet. Set in the eastern delta, Bubastis rises within a watery and fertile landscape, surrounded by canals, fields, and routes that make pilgrimage possible. Ancient descriptions speak of an impressive temple, set low within the city, visible from surrounding streets, with a sanctuary approach through a setting of trees and water. These accounts come through foreign eyes, and must be used with caution, because outsiders often shaped Egyptian religion into something strange for their audiences. Yet the picture of Bubastis as a major cult center is supported by the broader evidence of Bastet's importance. It was not a minor shrine to a charming animal. It was a destination and institution, and a sacred landscape where the cat goddess could draw crowds from far beyond the local community. To enter such a temple world is to enter a system in which animals are not merely animals. A living cat connected to Bastet may be fed, housed, protected, displayed, or ritually valued, because it carries the form through which the goddess can be approached. This does not mean every cat in Egypt is considered an incarnation of Bastet in a simple, identical way. Egyptian animal theology is more subtle than that. Some animals represent divine powers, Some are sacred to a deity. Some may serve as offerings. Some may be treated as vessel signs or living images. The categories shift depending on period, place, and cult. Scholars still debate how ordinary Egyptians understood these distinctions, and the evidence remains incomplete. But the central idea is clear enough: the animal form gives divine power a body close enough for humans to honor. This closeness is important because most people cannot see the hidden cult statue deep in the sanctuary. They may not be allowed into the most sacred rooms, but they can see animals. They can bring offerings. They can purchase or dedicate objects. They can leave behind a votive figure or a mummified cat as a physical prayer. The sacred animal cult turns divine relationship into something tangible. It allows a farmer, a mother, a soldier, a merchant, or a woman seeking fertility to take part in the goddess's world without needing access to royal ritual. The cat becomes a bridge between personal need and temple authority. Temples associated with animal cults often included practical facilities that modern visitors rarely imagine when looking at ruined stone walls. There had to be places to house animals, feed them, care for them, manage breeding, prepare offerings, and eventually preserve bodies after death. Sacredness required organization. Priests, attendants, embalmers, craftsmen, scribes, and sellers of votive objects could all become part of the economy surrounding a cult. A bronze cat statue, a small amulet, a linen-wrapped mummy, a written dedication, a jar of resin, a carved coffin for an animal body. Each object points not only to belief but to labor. Devotion had infrastructure. The living cats in such environments must have created a remarkable atmosphere. One can imagine temple courts where animals move through patches of light, where the smell of incense mingles with animal musk oil linen, and stored offerings where worshippers hear priests' rattles footsteps and the occasional cry of cats being fed or handled. It is tempting to picture a serene sanctuary filled only with elegant animals lounging like divine ornaments. The reality was probably more crowded, more practical, and more complicated. Cats need food. They fight, mate, scratch, give birth, fall ill, and die. A temple full of living symbols is also a place full of living bodies, and bodies create work. That work could itself become sacred. Feeding a cat connected to Bastet was not simply animal maintenance, it could be service to the goddess. Protecting the animal was protecting a divine form. Preparing its body after death could become a ritual act. The logic is familiar across Egyptian religion, where material care and spiritual meaning constantly overlap. To wash a statue, wrap a mummy, pour water, burn incense, or present food is not symbolic in a weak sense. It is an action that helps maintain relationship between worlds. Caring for sacred cats belonged to this wider pattern of ritual maintenance. The goddess was honored through the body of the animal that bore her sign. Yet no single explanation fully accounts for what happened as cat devotion expanded. By the late period and into the Ptolemaic era, animal cults in Egypt grew enormously in visibility. Pilgrimage increased, votive practices multiplied, and many sacred animal cemeteries accumulated astonishing numbers of mummies. This was not limited to cats. Ibises, falcons, crocodiles, dogs, baboons, fish rams, and other animals were also mummified and offered in different cults. Egypt became, in the eyes of many foreign observers, the land where animals received honors that seemed to rival or exceed those given to humans elsewhere. But within Egypt, these practices made sense as part of a long tradition of connecting divine powers to animal forms. Cats were one of the most famous cases because Bastet's appeal was so broad, and because the cat's domestic familiarity gave the cult emotional immediacy. A surprising and difficult detail is that some temple cat populations were probably maintained partly to supply votive mummies. This does not fit comfortably with modern affection for cats, but it belongs to the historical reality. Animals could be bred, raised, killed, embalmed, and sold or dedicated as offerings. The practice may sound contradictory, killing an animal sacred to a goddess in order to honor that goddess. But ancient votive systems often operate according to ritual logic rather than modern sentiment. The animal body becomes a messenger, a material prayer, a gift made durable through mummification. The discomfort is real, and scholars continue to examine how widespread, organized, and commercialized these practices were. What survives in the record suggests both devotion and industry, both reverence and exploitation. This tension should not make the worship seem fake. Human religions often transform sincerity into systems and systems into economies. A pilgrim may sincerely seek Bastet's help for childbirth or healing, while the temple that receives the offering may depend on workshops producing standardized mummies. A priest may believe in the goddess's power, while also managing supply payment and ritual procedure. A votive mummy may contain a carefully wrapped cat, a partial body, or in some cases material that reveals shortcuts or substitutions. None of this reduces the religion to fraud. It reveals the complicated human machinery that grows around sacred demand. The more beloved and accessible a goddess becomes, the more people want physical ways to reach her. The temple responds. The cat in this setting is transformed again. It is no longer only a hunter or companion. It becomes a unit of devotion, a sacred body that can be multiplied. A living animal can embody divine presence, while a mummified animal can carry a request into the divine realm. Bronze statues can stand where flesh decays. Amulets can carry feline protection on the body. Temple festivals can make Bastet's power audible through music and visible through crowds. The goddess's world expands through objects, animals, and movement. Worship is no longer confined to belief. It becomes a whole economy of sacred exchange. Still behind the organized cult remains the old power of the cat itself. The temple can breed cats, wrap them, sell votive offerings, and inscribe dedications, but the reason any of this works is that people already recognize the animal as meaningful. Its eyes silence fertility, hunting skill, cleanliness, and threshold life make it a persuasive divine form. A sacred animal cult cannot thrive on administration alone. It needs emotional recognition. When a worshipper sees a cat in the temple of Bastet, the image draws on memories from the house, the field, the nursery, the granary, the night. The goddess feels close because the animal is already close. The temple world therefore magnifies what Egyptian life has prepared. It turns a familiar creature into a ritual focus, a practical guardian into a theological body, and a household presence into a public cult. Bubastis and other centers of Bastet's worship show that Egyptian cat reverence was not merely private fondness. It was organized, architectural, economic, and communal. It had priests and pilgrims, workshops and animal keepers, festivals and cemeteries. It had beauty, devotion, contradiction, and commerce. The cat that once walked into a village after mice has now entered the sacred machinery of one of the ancient world's most enduring religious civilizations. In the temple it is fed not only with scraps from the household, but with offerings, prayers, and the weight of human hope. The most haunting evidence for Egypt's devotion to cats does not come from a single statue or a single temple story. It comes from bodies, thousands upon thousands of them, wrapped in linen darkened by resin, placed in jars, coffins, pits, corridors, and animal cemeteries, until sacred landscapes became crowded with the remains of creatures offered to the gods. A bronze cat can look elegant in a museum case. A painted cat beneath a chair can feel intimate and almost familiar. But a cat mummy is different. It carries devotion into death. It forces the viewer to confront a world in which animal bodies were not discarded as ordinary remains, but transformed, handled, wrapped, dedicated, and deposited as messages to divine powers. It also forces a more uncomfortable question: how much of this reverence involved care, and how much involved organized killing in the name of worship? The answer is not simple, and it should not be softened too quickly. Egyptian animal mummification was widespread, complex, and varied. Some mummified animals were beloved companions buried with attention. Some were sacred animals that lived in temples and were honored after natural death. Some were food offerings for humans in the afterlife. Many, especially in the great votive animal cults of later periods, were offerings purchased or dedicated by worshippers seeking contact with the deity. Cats associated with Bastet belong largely to this votive world, though not exclusively. The evidence remains incomplete because many animal cemeteries were disturbed in antiquity and heavily damaged in modern times. Early excavators sometimes treated animal mummies as curiosities' fertilizer, or obstacles rather than fragile archives of religious behavior. Countless remains were removed without the careful recording that modern archaeology would demand. Even so, what survives is astonishing. Cat mummies have been found in large numbers at sites connected with feline worship, including areas near Bubastis and Saqqara. Some are beautifully wrapped with linen arranged in geometric patterns, faces modelled or painted, ears suggested, and outer casings shaped to evoke the living animal. Others are simpler bundles, quickly prepared, standardized, or mass-produced. Some contain complete cats, some contain kittens, some contain only partial remains, some contain bones of more than one animal. Some, when examined through X-ray or CT scanning, reveal that the outer package promised more than the contents delivered. A mummy shaped like a cat may hold only fragments, or in some cases material that makes the offering seem symbolic, rather than anatomically complete. Scholars still debate how worshippers understood these variations. Did buyers know what was inside? Did priests consider a fragment sufficient? Were some bundles deceptive? Or did ritual form matter more than biological completeness? No single explanation fully accounts for the evidence. Modern imaging has changed the study of cat mummies profoundly. Earlier generations often had to unwrap mummies to see what they contained, destroying the very object they hoped to understand. Today, scanning allows researchers to examine bones, age, posture, injuries, and wrapping techniques without cutting open the bundle. The results have complicated the older romantic view of sacred animals. Many mummified cats were young, sometimes only a few months old. Some appear to have had their necks broken. Others show signs consistent with deliberate killing. This suggests that at least some temple economies bred cats specifically for votive offerings, raising them only long enough to be used ritually. To modern sensibilities, this is disturbing. It should be disturbing. But it also reveals how ancient devotion could operate according to a logic very different from modern pet affection. In the Egyptian votive system, an animal mummy could function as a durable prayer. A worshipper comes to a temple seeking Bastet's favor, protection in childbirth, healing from illness, fertility, safety. For a child, relief from fear, gratitude for a blessing already received. The worshipper dedicates a cat mummy not because the animal is meaningless, but because it is deeply meaningful. The body becomes a gift in the correct divine language. It is a feline form offered to a feline goddess. In a world where mummification preserves the body for continued existence and ritual power, the wrapped cat is not simply dead matter. It is prepared matter, transformed matter, directed toward the sacred. What survives in the record suggests that the offering could stand in for a voice, a written petition, a vow, or an act of personal piety. Yet the scale of production changes the emotional atmosphere. A single cherished cat buried carefully evokes intimacy. A cemetery packed with mass-produced votive mummies evokes institution. Both can be religious, but they feel different. The growth of animal cults in the first millennium BCE created systems that required supply. If thousands of worshippers wanted offerings, temples needed animals, embalmers, wrappings, resins, containers, storage, priests, and sales arrangements. Devotion became logistical. Sacred demand created sacred industry. This does not mean the entire practice was cynical. It means that belief became large enough to require management. The same thing happens in many religious traditions. Pilgrimage creates roads, shrines, inns, markets, workshops, souvenirs, offerings, and officials. The sacred attracts infrastructure like a river attracts settlements. The difficult evidence of young cats and standardized bundles also raises the question of whether ancient Egyptians saw a contradiction between venerating cats and killing them for offerings. For many, perhaps they did not. The animal was not being killed as a meaningless act of cruelty, but as part of a ritual process that transformed it into a sacred gift. That explanation does not erase the violence. It explains the context in which the violence made sense. Egyptian religion had long experience with sacrifice offering and the ritual use of bodies. Food animals were slaughtered for gods and for the dead. Birds, cattle, and other creatures entered offering systems. The cat's sacredness did not necessarily protect every individual cat from death. Rather, it made the cat's body powerful enough to serve as an offering. This is one of the hardest distinctions for modern audiences to accept, but it is central to understanding the past without reshaping it into comfort. There is also evidence of genuine care. Some animal mummies are elaborately prepared far beyond what would be necessary for a token gesture. The linen work can be beautiful. The shaping of ears and faces suggests attention to the cat's identity, as a cat, not merely as raw material. Small coffins and bronze images show that the animal form was honored aesthetically. In some cases, cats were buried with signs of affection or status. The ancient world rarely fits one moral category. It can preserve tenderness and exploitation in the same practice, sometimes in the same cemetery. Scholars still debate the relative proportions of pet burials, sacred temple animals, and commercial votive offerings, but the variety itself is telling. Egyptian cat reverence was not one behavior, it was a spectrum. A lesser-known chapter in the afterlife of cat mummies is what happened to them after ancient Egypt. In the 19th century, huge numbers of animal mummies were removed from Egypt, sometimes treated with little respect. Some were ground for fertilizer, shipped in bulk, or sold as curios. Cat mummies that had once been offerings to a goddess entered industrial and colonial economies as commodities. This modern destruction damaged the archaeological record and added a final irony to the story. Bodies preserved for sacred endurance were scattered by people who often did not understand or value the beliefs that created them. The loss is enormous. Every disturbed mummy removes information about wrapping, placement, dating, associated objects, and ritual context. The evidence remains incomplete, not only because ancient practices were complex, but because modern handling often made them harder to reconstruct. Even damaged the cat mummies speak. They tell us that the worship of cats was not a decorative preference. It mobilized labor, money, breeding, killing, embalming, pilgrimage, and burial space. It involved people from different levels of society, not only kings and priests. It gave ordinary worshippers a way to approach the divine through a material act. The mummy could remain in a sacred place after the worshipper left, continuing the relationship in silence. In a culture obsessed with preservation that mattered, The offering did not vanish like smoke. It endured wrapped in linen, sealed in darkness, multiplied beside thousands of others. The form of the mummy itself deepens the meaning. Mummification in Egypt is tied to the hope that the body can be preserved as a foundation for continued existence. Human mummification aims at the afterlife of the individual, but animal mummification can serve several purposes. A cat mummy offered to Bastet may not be about the cat's personal afterlife in the same way as a human burial, though Egyptians may have imagined animals participating in divine realms in ways that are difficult to recover. More importantly, the preserved animal body becomes stable. It resists decay. It becomes an object that can occupy sacred space over time. The cat's living qualities, its watchfulness, fertility, and protective force are condensed into a ritual object that does not run away, age, or hunt. Death fixes the symbol, but fixing the symbol also removes the living animal's freedom, and that tension lies at the heart of the evidence. The living cat is independent, unpredictable, crossing thresholds as it chooses. The mummified cat is bound, wrapped, and placed where humans want divine contact to occur. The same culture that admired the cat's untamed qualities also transformed cat bodies into controlled offerings. This is not hypocrisy, so much as the ancient ritual impulse to make fleeting power durable. A living cat's sacredness moves, a mummy's sacredness stays. Temples needed both living symbols to embody divine presence and preserved offerings to accumulate devotion. When archaeologists study these mummies today, they are not merely studying animal bones. They are studying desire. Each bundle represents a human act someone paid, prayed, dedicated, fulfilled, a vow, sought help, gave thanks, or participated in a ritual economy that promised access to Bastet. The individual names are often gone. The words spoken over the offerings have mostly vanished. The cats themselves are silent, yet the mass of them is a kind of testimony. It says that countless people believed the feline form could carry their hopes beyond ordinary speech. It says that the goddess's favor was worth a journey, a payment, a gift, and the preservation of a small body in linen. The cat mummy therefore stands as one of the clearest and most troubling answers to why Egyptians worshipped cats. They worshipped them because cats were protectors, symbols, companions, and divine forms, but also because the body of a cat could become a ritual instrument powerful enough to approach a goddess. Reverence did not always mean rescue. Sacredness did not always mean gentleness. In Egypt, the holy could be beautiful, practical, commercial, tender, and violent at the same time. The wrapped cats of the cemeteries preserve that contradiction better than any smooth explanation can. They lie at the meeting point of love and system prayer and industry, animal life and divine hunger. And in their silence they remind us that ancient devotion was not always soft. Sometimes it had a claws, sometimes it came wrapped in linen. If the cat mummies show the solemn and troubling side of Bastet's worship, the festivals reveal its living pulse. At Bubastis, devotion did not remain sealed in tomb-dark corridors or wrapped in linen. It spilled into boat streets, music, laughter, offerings, perfume, wine, and crowds moving through the delta, with the excitement of people approaching a goddess who welcomed joy as part of reverence. The sacred cat was not only a guardian of quiet rooms and hidden threats. Through Bastet it became connected with celebration, sensuality, rhythm release, and the brief loosening of ordinary restraint. In a civilization so often imagined through stone faces and eternal stillness, the festival of Bastet reminds us that Egyptian religion could be noisy bodily and intensely alive. Bubastis stood in the eastern Nile Delta where waterways made movement possible, and the land opened into a network of canals, fields, towns, and routes toward Asia. A festival there was not simply a local event. It could draw pilgrims from many places, especially during periods when Bastite's cult was flourishing. People travelled by boat, which in Egypt was always more than transportation. The river and its channels were arteries of life trade, administration, myth, and pilgrimage. Boats carried grain-stone soldiers, officials, funerary processions, divine images, and ordinary families. During a festival, they also carried expectation. One can imagine vessels moving along the water in loose processions, crowded with men and women, provisions, instruments, jars of drink offerings, and the excited disorder that gathers when sacred time interrupts ordinary labour. Ancient accounts describe the journey to Bubastis as unusually festive, with music, clapping, singing, drinking, and playful behaviour directed toward people on the riverbanks as the boats passed by. These descriptions come mostly through Greek observers, especially Herodotus, and they must be treated carefully. Greek writers often framed Egyptian customs as strange, excessive, or memorable for foreign audiences. They may have exaggerated numbers, misunderstood rituals, or highlighted behavior that seemed exotic to them. Yet the broad impression is hard to dismiss. Bastet's festival was famous for its scale and exuberance. What survives in the record suggests not a quiet procession of silent worshippers, but a public event in which piety and pleasure were deliberately intertwined. This matters because modern people sometimes divide religion into solemn belief on one side and celebration on the other. Ancient Egypt did not draw that line so sharply. Music, dance, intoxication, fragrance, erotic energy, and laughter could all belong to the sacred when properly directed. The gods did not only receive fear and obedience, they received delight. They could be pleased, soothed, awakened, entertained, and drawn close through sound and beauty. In the cults of goddesses, especially music and sensual pleasure often held ritual significance. The sistrum, a rattling instrument associated with Hathor and also with Bastet's world, was not merely accompaniment. Its sound could pacify dangerous divine forces, fill space with ordered vibration, and transform mood. To shake the sistrum was to do something, not just decorate a ceremony. Bastet's festival, therefore, belongs to the same religious logic that transforms lioness fury into domestic protection. Dangerous power must be cooled. Heat must be turned toward life rather than destruction. The goddess who carries feline danger can also be honored through joy, because joy is one way of bringing divine force into balance. This is not frivolous. In a world where plague, infertility, childbirth danger, crop failure, and sudden death are never far away, celebration can become a form of defiance. To gather, sing, drink, and honor the goddess of protection is to insist that life is still fertile, still fragrant, still worth guarding. The music is not an escape from fear. It is one answer to fear. The presence of women in these festival accounts is especially significant. Bastet's cult is strongly associated with female life, fertility, sexuality, childbirth, motherhood, and adornment, though men also worshipped her. A festival in her honor could offer women a rare public religious space where sound, movement, and bodily presence were central rather than hidden. The accounts that describe women lifting their garments or engaging in teasing gestures may reflect real ritualized license, Greek fascination, misunderstanding, or some combination of all three. Scholars still debate how much weight to give these descriptions. But even if some details are distorted, the connection between Bastet's worship and female festive energy remains important. The goddess's world was not abstract. It touched the body, perfume on skin, jewelry at the throat, music in the hands, fertility in the womb, milk at the breast, desire in the blood, fear in childbirth, grief when children died, relief when they lived. Perfume and scent deserve attention here. Bastet's name has sometimes been linked with a jar of ointment, though the precise linguistic relationship is debated. Whether or not that etymology fully explains her identity, fragrance fits her cult beautifully. Egypt valued scent deeply. Oils, resins, incense, and perfumes belong to ritual sexuality status, cleanliness, and burial. Scent crosses boundaries in a way that suits Bastet. It is invisible, but powerful. It enters a room before the body does. It clings to skin and cloth. It pleases the gods as marks refinement among humans. A cat goddess linked with perfume is not merely decorative. She belongs to the sensory world of protection, attraction, and sacred presence. Fragrance, like music, changes an atmosphere. The festival crowd would have been a sensory world of its own. Boats approach the city. Dust rises from roads. Water reflects bright sun. People carry food, flowers, jars, rattles, amulets, and offerings. Priests maintain ritual order even as the wider crowd surges with excitement. Vendors may sell objects for dedication. Families arrive with hopes too private to record. Some seek children. Some give thanks for safe birth. Some ask protection from illness. Some come because their parents came, because the festival is woven into the year, because pilgrimage itself creates belonging. The temple stands at the center, but the goddess seems to expand beyond stone into the whole moving crowd. Bubastis becomes for a time a city of Bastet not only in name but in rhythm. There is a lesser-known political dimension to such festivals. Large religious gatherings were also demonstrations of social cohesion and temple prestige. A cult center that drew pilgrims gained wealth, reputation, and influence. Offerings flowed in. Local economies benefited. Priests and officials managed crowds, rituals, and resources. The goddess's popularity strengthened the city associated with her. In Egypt, religion and administration were never isolated from one another. A festival could be ecstatic for worshippers and economically significant for institutions. No single explanation fully accounts for Bastet's prominence, but festival culture helps show how devotion becomes public power. A goddess beloved in households becomes a goddess capable of filling a city. The festival also reveals why cat worship cannot be reduced to animal mummification. The mummies are still silent and final. The festival is moving loud and temporary. Both honor Bastet, but they express different needs. The votive mummy preserves a prayer in sacred space. The festival dissolves ordinary time and allows worshippers to feel themselves inside the goddess's energy. A person may bring an offering to be left behind, then join music and drinking that vanish by morning. One act seeks permanence, the other seeks intensity. Egyptian religion needed both because human life needs both something that lasts beyond the moment and something that makes the moment feel filled with divine presence. Outsiders often found this combination confusing. To them, animal worship could already seem strange. Animal worship accompanied by mass festivity, drinking, music, and sexual openness seemed stranger still. But from within the Egyptian system the pieces fit. Bastet is a feline goddess whose protective force has been turned toward fertility, pleasure, motherhood, and household safety. Her festival celebrates precisely those domains. It is not a contradiction for worshippers to honor a protective goddess through joy. Joy is what protection makes possible. A guarded home is not valuable only because it keeps danger out. It is valuable because inside it people can eat, sleep, conceive, give birth, sing, love, and remember. Bastet guards life so that life can be lived. Still, the evidence leaves gaps. We do not possess the voices of most pilgrims. We do not know exactly what a woman from a village prayed as she approached the temple, or what a father hoped for as he dedicated an offering, or how a child experienced the noise and color of the festival. We have fragments, descriptions, objects, ruins and later interpretations, the evidence remains incomplete, and the ancient crowd is mostly anonymous. Yet anonymity may make the scene more powerful. The festival was not only about famous kings or elite tomb owners, it belonged to multitudes whose names vanished, but whose movement toward Bastet left marks in the archaeological and literary record. The crowd's energy also reflects a wider truth about ancient religion. Sacred order sometimes requires controlled disorder. Festivals often suspend ordinary rhythms. People travel instead of working, drink more than usual, sing loudly, crowd together, make offerings, and behave in ways that might seem improper in daily life. But the suspension is temporary and ritually framed. It does not destroy order, it renews it. Like the Nile flood which overwhelms the fields before making them fertile, festival excess can be understood as a force that must rise, spread, and recede. Bastet's feline nature suits this pattern. The cat is controlled and uncontrolled, near and untamed, affectionate and dangerous. Her festival breathes with the same double life. When the celebrations ended, pilgrims returned home along the waterways and roads of Egypt. The music faded, the jars emptied, the temple kept its offerings, the city settled back into ordinary time, but the goddess's presence travelled with them in amulets. Memories answered prayers, promised vows, and perhaps new cats fed more carefully in courtyards because they carried her shadow. The festival transformed devotion from private dependence into shared experience. It allowed thousands of people to feel that the protector of households and fertility was also the mistress of collective joy. In Bubastis, the sacred cat was not only seen in bronze linen or myth. It was heard in rattles, tasted in wine, smelled in perfume, and felt in the press of bodies moving toward a goddess who guarded life, not by making it silent, but by letting it sing. The cat's closeness to women in Egyptian imagery is not accidental, and it is not merely decorative. It belongs to one of the most delicate regions of ancient life, the need to protect fertility, childbirth, beauty, desire, and the continuity of the household. In a world where birth is dangerous, childhood is fragile, and family survival depends on both food and descendants, the goddess who takes the form of a cat becomes more than a charming household spirit. She stands near the places where life begins, where bodies are most vulnerable, and where hope is strongest because the risks are so high. Bastet's warmth, music, perfume, sexuality, and maternal force all gather around this center. The cat is sacred not only because it kills mice and snakes, but because it embodies the fierce tenderness required to keep life going. Egyptian society placed enormous value on family continuity. Tombs, offerings, inheritance, names, and memory all depended on descendants who could maintain ties with the dead. To have children was not only a personal desire, it was a social and religious anchor. A son or daughter could speak the names of parents, bring offerings, preserve property, and keep the family line visible in the world of the living. Yet pregnancy and childbirth in the ancient world were dangerous. Women faced pain, infection, hemorrhage, difficult labor, and death. Infants faced illness, malnutrition, accident, and the many hazards of a world without modern medicine. In such conditions, fertility is never casual. It is precious, anxious, and surrounded by protective ritual. This is where Bastet's feline character becomes especially powerful. A mother cat is a familiar image of guarded reproduction. She gives birth to multiple kittens, hides them, warms them, nurses them, carries them by the neck, and defends them with sudden aggression. She is soft with her young but violent toward threats. The image would not have been abstract to Egyptians living close to animals. They would have seen cats nesting in corners, moving kittens to safer places, hissing at intruders, and curling their bodies around small blind lives. In that behavior, the cat offers a living model of maternal protection. It is not difficult to see why a cat goddess could be invoked by women hoping for conception, safe birth, healthy children, or protection from dangers that gather around the threshold of life. The association between cats and women also appears in art. In tomb scenes, cats often sit beneath women's chairs or near female figures in banqueting settings. These scenes can include lotus flowers, perfume cones, fine clothing, jewelry, music, and sensual abundance. They are images of ideal life, pleasure, status, and renewal. The cat's placement within them suggests more than household realism. It participates in a visual language of femininity, eroticism, fertility, and protection. A cat beneath the chair is near the body, but also beneath it like a guardian at the foundation of the scene. Its quiet presence gives the image another layer. Beauty and pleasure rest above a hidden hunter. Fertility is watched by claws. This blend of sensuality and defense is deeply Egyptian. Goddesses connected with women's lives are rarely only gentle. Hathor may be goddess of love, music, motherhood, and intoxication, yet she also has fierce forms. Sekhmet brings destruction and healing. Taweret, protector of childbirth, combines features of dangerous animals, including the hippopotamus, crocodile, and lion, because birth requires formidable guardians. Best, the protective household figure associated with childbirth sexuality. Music and sleep is not conventionally beautiful, but fiercely apotropaic, meant to repel harm. Bastet belongs in this protective circle. Her cat form is elegant, but elegance does not make her weak. Her beauty is guarded beauty with teeth. Perfume, cosmetics, and adornment deepen the connection. Ancient Egyptian women and men both used cosmetics and scents, but in art and symbolism these elements often gather around feminine presence, sexuality, celebration, and divine favor. Kohl around the eyes, scented oils on the skin, elaborate wigs, jewelry, linen, and lotus flowers all belong to a world where bodily presentation is spiritually meaningful as well as socially expressive. Beauty is not shallow in this context. It is linked to health, rebirth, erotic, vitality, divine attraction, and the restoration of the body against decay. If Bastet's name or later associations connect her with ointment jars and fragrance that link suits a goddess whose power touches both pleasure and protection. Scent can please the gods, mark the body as cared for, and create an atmosphere where life feels ordered rather than polluted. A lesser known but important detail is that ancient Egyptian protective magic for women and children often used objects of daily life rather than grand temple monuments. Wands, amulets, figurines, headrests, birth bricks, and small images could carry protective power into rooms where birth, sleep, and illness occurred. These objects might invoke deities and dangerous animals turned into guardians. The logic is intimate. Protection must be where vulnerability happens. A temple festival may honor Bastet publicly, but a pregnant woman needs divine help close to the bed, close to the body, close to the moment when labor begins. The cat's domestic presence made Bastet especially suitable for this kind of nearness. She was not only a goddess on a distant wall, her living form could be encountered in the house. This does not mean every Egyptian woman worshipped Bastet in the same way, or that every cat image had a single fixed meaning. The evidence remains incomplete and local practice varied across time. Elite tomb art preserves the ideals of wealthy households more than the daily rituals of the poor. Many women's voices are filtered through male scribes' formal scenes and objects whose original context has been lost. Still, the pattern is strong enough to matter. Bastet's cult attracted associations with fertility, sexuality, childbirth music, and female adornment, because those domains needed exactly the kind of power the cat represented: intimate, watchful, warm, and capable of sudden defense. The connection between cats and sexuality must also be handled carefully. Modern stereotypes sometimes turn Bastet into a vague goddess of erotic glamour, flattening her into an exotic image far removed from Egyptian thought. But sexuality in Egyptian religion is not merely decorative, it is part of creation and renewal. Desire leads to conception, pleasure affirms life, fertility sustains families, fields, herds, and the cosmic order itself. A goddess connected with music, intoxication, sensuality, and cats belongs to a world view in which life must continually be regenerated. The cat's reproductive abundance and graceful bodily presence made it a natural symbol, but the meaning reaches beyond seduction. It is about the force that keeps the world populated, warm and moving forward. Children especially stood under the need for protection. Ancient parents knew loss intimately. Many children did not survive to adulthood. Amulets and protective figures around children were not superstition in the dismissive sense. They were responses to real vulnerability in a medical world with limited options. A cat that killed snakes and rodents near the house could become part of the emotional landscape of child safety. Bastet, as a divine extension of that protective animal, could be asked to guard the small body against threats both visible and invisible. No single explanation fully accounts for the devotion given to her, but the fear of losing children surely gave her cult deep emotional power. There is also the simple fact of warmth. Cats seek warm places, and humans do too. In mud brick homes beneath shifting temperatures of day and night, a cat curled near a person creates a quiet bodily comfort. Such details rarely enter formal history, but they matter. Religion grows not only from kings and myths, but from repeated sensations: the smell of oil, the weight of a child, the sound of a rattle, the sight of a cat nursing kittens, the relief of grain untouched, the softness of fur under a hand. Egyptian devotion to cats cannot be explained if all tenderness is removed from the picture. Practical protection began the relationship, but emotional familiarity helped sustain it. The image of the cat beneath the woman's chair may therefore be one of the most condensed symbols in Egyptian art. Above the human world of music, fragrance, clothing, social identity, erotic charm, and family continuity, below the animal guardian, quiet and alert, linked to the goddess who protects the vulnerable pleasures of life. The chair itself becomes a kind of threshold between visible elegance and hidden defense. The woman is not shown as helpless. Egyptian women could own property, manage household, participate in religious life, and hold social authority in ways that varied by status and period. But the image recognizes that beauty, fertility, and domestic abundance require guardianship. Bastet's feline motherhood also connects back to the lioness goddesses. The lioness is a mother too fierce in defense of her cubs. The house cat brings that same principle into the human room. This continuity between wild and domestic motherhood is crucial. It prevents Bastet from becoming merely pretty. Her maternal power is not passive softness. It is the willingness to strike for life. In a world where birth opens the door to danger, the best protector is not harmless. The best protector is controlled danger on the side of the child. So Egyptians worshipped cats partly because cats stood near the deepest human hope that life would continue. Grain might last through the season. A woman might conceive. A child might survive. A household might remain whole. A dead parent's name might be spoken by descendants. A goddess might hear the rattle of music and turn her fierce face kindly toward the family. The cat with kittens hidden in shadow and eyes bright in the dark made that hope visible. It was small enough to share the home and powerful enough to symbolize the protection of birth itself. In Bastet, Egyptians found a divine form that did not separate pleasure from danger, beauty from defense, or motherhood from ferocity. The sacred cat guarded not only the grain jar but the future breathing inside the house. The reverence Egyptians gave to cats did not remain hidden inside homes and temples. It became visible enough, serious enough, and strange enough to foreign eyes that stories about it travelled beyond Egypt itself. Greek and Roman writers looked at Egyptian animal cults with fascination, amusement, suspicion, and sometimes genuine respect. They saw a civilization of immense antiquity, honouring creatures that other Mediterranean peoples might treat as ordinary, useful, or even contemptible. To them, the Egyptian cat could become a symbol of Egypt's difference, a creature protected with startling intensity, mourned when dead, linked with law, religion, and public emotion. Yet foreign accounts are difficult mirrors. They preserve clues, but they also distort. They tell us not only what Egyptians may have done, but what outsiders found difficult to understand. One famous strand of ancient writing claims that Egyptians treated the killing of cats with extreme severity. In some accounts, a person who killed a cat, even accidentally, could face violent punishment from a crowd. Another story tells of Egyptians refusing to harm cats, even when enemies used them cynically in war, placing sacred animals before their lines to exploit Egyptian reverence. These stories have been repeated for centuries, often as if they were simple facts. They may contain kernels of truth about the high status of cats and the horror Egyptians felt at their mistreatment, but they must be handled carefully. Ancient authors like dramatic examples. They used Egypt as a land of marvels, inversions, and old wisdom. A story about an entire people paralyzed by concern for cats might reveal real religious respect, but it might also exaggerate that respect into a moral spectacle for foreign readers. The most famous military tale involves the Persian conquest of Egypt, where later tradition claims that Persian forces used cats or images of sacred animals to weaken Egyptian resistance. It is an unforgettable image, soldiers reluctant to shoot because divine creatures stand before the enemy. But historians are cautious. The story appears in later sources and has the flavour of moral anecdote, explaining conquest through religious vulnerability. It may preserve a memory of Egyptian animal reverence being exploited or mocked, yet the details are uncertain. The evidence remains incomplete, and no responsible reconstruction of Egyptian military history can rest on this tale alone. Still, the story survived because it felt plausible to people who already believed Egyptians held cats in extraordinary esteem. Even a doubtful legend can reveal a reputation. That reputation mattered. In the ancient Mediterranean imagination, Egypt was both admired and ridiculed for animal worship. Greek thinkers could respect Egyptian antiquity mathematics, priestly learning, and monumental achievement, while still finding animal cults baffling. Some tried to interpret them symbolically, arguing that Egyptians did not worship animals themselves, but the divine qualities they represented. Others treated the practices as evidence of superstition. Roman writers could be even sharper, using Egyptian animal reverence as a sign of foreign excess. The cat, along with the ibis, crocodile, bull, and other sacred creatures, entered a long debate about whether Egypt possessed profound hidden wisdom or absurd religious habits. No single explanation fully accounts for foreign attitudes because admiration and mockery often appear side by side. The Egyptians themselves likely would not have recognized the crude accusation that they simply worshipped animals as animals. Their religious world allowed divine power to appear through animal forms, local manifestations, sacred bodies, symbolic traits, and ritual associations. A cat connected with Bastet was not honoured in the same simplistic way that a person might admire a pretty creature. It participated in a divine network. But explaining that to outsiders was not easy. especially to cultures whose own gods were usually imagined in human form, even when associated with animals. Greek religion had sacred animals and animal symbols, but Egyptian animal cults developed with a scale and institutional seriousness that seemed unusual. The foreign misunderstanding came partly from difference in emphasis, not total absence of shared ideas. Law and custom surrounding cats are especially hard to reconstruct. Did Egypt have formal penalties for killing cats? Were punishments local, customary, religious, or exaggerated by outsiders? The sources do not allow a simple answer across all periods. It is likely that harming animals sacred to a deity could be treated as sacrilegious, especially in certain cities or temple contexts. It is also likely that emotions ran high when sacred animals were mistreated. But the dramatic claim that every cat everywhere was protected by a universal death penalty is too neat. Ancient Egypt lasted for millennia, with changing laws, dynasties, regions, and practices. What survives in the record suggests strong protections and taboos. In some contexts, not a single timeless legal code, applying identically to every village cat from the Old Kingdom to Roman rule. Still, the emotional seriousness was real. The death of a household cat could provoke mourning. Some sources describe Egyptians shaving eyebrows when a cat died, though again this comes through foreign testimony, and may reflect specific customs rather than universal practice. Mourning animals is not surprising in a culture that gave ritual attention to death preservation and continuity. If cats were companions, protectors, and divine associated beings, grief at their death would be both personal and religious. A dead cat could be more than a lost animal. It could be a rupture in the household's protective atmosphere, a small collapse in the familiar order of daily life. Foreign eyes also noticed the economic side of sacred animals. Temples, animal keepers, embalmers, and sellers of votive offerings created visible systems that travelers could observe. To an outsider, this might look like a strange market in holiness. To an Egyptian participant, it could be a proper way of approaching divine power through material gifts. The difference between devotion and commerce is not always clear in any religious society. A person buying an offering is not necessarily less sincere because money changes hands. Yet commercial scale invites criticism. Ancient critics could see priests profiting from animal cults, while believers saw temples enabling contact with the gods. Scholars still debate how much skepticism existed among Egyptians themselves, especially in later periods when animal cults became highly organized and economically significant. The cat also became entangled in diplomacy and imperial politics. When foreign powers ruled Egypt, they had to navigate Egyptian religious sensibilities. Persians, Greeks, and Romans could not simply ignore local cults without risking resentment. Some foreign rulers adopted Egyptian religious imagery, sponsored temples, or presented themselves as legitimate pharaohs honoring Egyptian gods. The Ptolemy's Greek rulers after Alexander were especially skilled at combining Greek royal identity with Egyptian temple patronage. In such a world, honoring Bastet and other deities was not only piety, it was political strategy. A ruler who respected Egypt's gods could claim continuity. A ruler who mocked them could appear hostile to the land itself. This political dimension complicates the image of cats as merely beloved pets. A sacred animal could become a symbol of loyalty, identity, and resistance. To defend Egyptian animal cults was in some periods to defend Egyptian tradition against foreign misunderstanding. Outsiders might laugh at the cat goddess, but Egyptians could see in that laughter an attack on the order of their world. Religion is often most fiercely guarded when it becomes a marker of cultural difference. The cat, small as it is, could carry the weight of Egypt's self-definition in the eyes of others. There is a revealing irony here. The more foreign writers mocked or marvelled at Egyptian cat worship, the more they helped preserve its fame. Their misunderstandings became part of the cat's afterlife. Later generations inherited stories of Egyptians so devoted to cats that they would risk defeat, punish killers, mourn publicly, and fill cemeteries with mummified feline bodies. Some of these stories were exaggerated, some were misunderstood, some were based on real practices seen through a distorting lens, but together they created a powerful image Egypt as the civilization that took cats seriously in a way no other ancient society did. Yet the Egyptians did not protect cats because they were naive or irrational. They protected them because cats stood within a system of meaning that joined household survival, divine femininity, fertility, cosmic defense, and temple ritual. Foreign observers often saw only the surface an animal receiving honor. They missed the long history behind that honor. They didn't always see the mouse in the granary, the snake near the child, the lioness in the goddess, the festival crowd at Bubastis, the mother praying for safe birth, the priest managing offerings, the bronze votive figure carrying a vanished hope. Without those layers, Egyptian cat reverence looked absurd. With them, it becomes one of the most coherent expressions of Egyptian religion. The stories of law violence and foreign eyes therefore reveal less about cats alone than about the difficulty of translating sacred worlds. What seems obvious inside one culture can look bizarre outside it. To an Egyptian, a cat might be a guardian under the protection of Bastet, a living sign of divine force in the home. To a Greek soldier or Roman satirist, it might be only an animal strangely elevated above reason. Between those views lies the gap where many ancient misunderstandings were born. The cat crossed thresholds in Egyptian life, and after Egypt met foreign empires, it crossed another threshold, from sacred presence into international symbol. It became a small animal carrying a civilization's reputation on its back, praised, mocked, protected, exaggerated, and never again seen as merely ordinary. The cat does not disappear when the house falls silent and the body of its owner is carried west. In Egypt, death is not imagined as a clean ending but as a dangerous transition, a passage that must be prepared, defended, supplied, and remembered. The dead need food, words, images, names, protective spells, and the continuing attention of the living. They need the world they knew to be remade in durable form so that it can accompany them beyond decay. This is why tombs preserve banquets, fields, boats, servants, animals, gardens, tools, offerings, and scenes of pleasure. The afterlife Egyptians hoped for was not an empty clouded distance. It was life restored, ordered, perfected, and protected. If cats mattered in the living household, it is not surprising that they followed Egyptians into the world of burial and memory. A tomb scene is never merely decoration. It is a working image, a magical and social statement about what should continue. When a cat appears beneath a chair in a tomb banquet, or crouches near birds in a marsh scene, or sits calmly in a domestic setting, it belongs to this machinery of continuation. The painted cat helps preserve the ideal household atmosphere around the deceased. It brings with it protection, familiarity, fertility, elegance, and the pleasure of ordinary life refined into eternity. To modernize such a small detail may seem charming but secondary. To Egyptian eyes, the small detail could be powerful precisely because eternity required completeness. A good afterlife needed bread and beer, cool water and shade, family and music, clothing and scent fields and servants, and perhaps also the quiet animal that guarded the rooms of life. The placement of cats in tomb art often reveals the same layered meaning seen in domestic life. Beneath a woman's chair, the cat is close to the body, close to perfume, music, and feast. It may suggest erotic vitality and household abundance. but it also suggests protection. In marsh scenes, the cat lunges among birds, sometimes in ways that look lively and natural, sometimes in ways that seem more symbolic than realistic. The marsh in Egyptian art is not just a hunting ground. It is a place of fertility, rebirth, and wild abundance dense with papyrus birds, fish, insects, and hidden life. To place a cat there is to show a predator moving within the fertile chaos of nature, seizing, controlling, and participating in it. The image holds pleasure and mastery together. It allows the deceased to enjoy the richness of the Nile world forever, but not as helpless prey within it. Order is present even in the reeds. Some of the most intimate evidence comes from animal burials themselves. Egyptians buried many kinds of animals for many reasons. Some were offerings, some were sacred manifestations, some were food for the dead, some appear to have been cherished companions. Distinguishing these categories can be difficult, especially when burials are disturbed or poorly recorded. Yet individual animal burials remind us that ancient Egyptians could form personal bonds with animals strong enough to require ritual treatment after death. Dogs are well known in this context, and cats too could receive burial attention. The evidence remains incomplete, but it suggests that not every mummified cat was a mass-produced votive object. Some may have belonged to households that valued them as companions or protectors, and perhaps wished to preserve that relationship beyond death. This possibility matters because Egyptian memory was deeply bodily. The body of a human being was preserved not because Egyptians naively believed flesh alone guaranteed immortality, but because identity needed anchors: body name, image, shadow, spirit offerings, and ritual. To preserve an animal body was to grant it a kind of ritual significance, though not always the same afterlife status as a human. A cat mummy dedicated to Bastet might be a prayer. A cat buried with care near a person might be a companion. A cat interred in a sacred cemetery might be a divine associated body. The categories overlap, and scholars still debate how Egyptians understood the fate of animals after death. But the repeated act of wrapping cats in linen shows that their bodies could matter in the sacred economy of memory. Linen itself is important. Wrapping transforms. A living cat is quick, warm, and unpredictable. A dead cat, if left alone, decays like any body. But a wrapped cat becomes something else, shaped, purified, stabilized, and placed into a ritual pattern. Resins, bandages, amulets, masks, or coffins could turn remains into an object with meaning and duration. In Egyptian religion, preservation resists the disorder of decay. Decay is not merely biological, it threatens identity, memory, and form. A cat mummy therefore participates in the same great cultural struggle against dissolution that defines Egyptian funerary practice more broadly. The animal that once defended grain from rodents now has its own form defended from time. Cats also appear through amulets and small objects placed in burial contexts. An amulet does not need to be large to be powerful. Egyptian protective objects often work through compactness, a symbol held against the body, a small figure tucked into wrappings, a form that invokes a deity at close range. Cat or Bastet amulets could connect the wearer with protection, fertility, joy, and divine favor. In tombs, such objects help extend protection into the afterlife, where dangers are numerous. The dead must pass gates, answer challenges, avoid hostile beings, and navigate a transformed landscape. A guardian associated with night vision threshold crossing and the defeat of serpents has obvious value in such a journey. The serpent theme returns powerfully here. The afterlife is full of dangerous beings, and the sun god's nightly passage through the underworld remains one of Egypt's central cosmic dramas. A cat that attacks a serpent in mythic imagery is not only a household protector, it is a defender of passage through darkness. For the dead who must also pass through darkness into renewed life, such symbolism matters. The cat's ability to confront hidden danger becomes an afterlife quality. It watches where sight fails. It strikes where hesitation would be fatal. It belongs to the liminal zones where transformation occurs. No single explanation fully accounts for every funerary use of feline imagery, but the fit between cat symbolism and afterlife protection is strong. There is a lesser-known emotional dimension in the way animals appear in tombs. They help make eternity recognizable. Egyptian afterlife belief is grand and cosmic, but it is also deeply attached to the pleasures of earthly existence. The dead want to breathe air, drink water, eat bread, sit with family, move through fields, sail in boats, and enjoy music. They do not want a cold abstraction. The presence of familiar animals helps populate eternity with the texture of life. A cat beneath the chair is a small declaration that the afterlife includes home. Not merely a palace of gods, not merely a court of judgment, but the inhabited world of touch, sound, food, and companionship. The cat makes eternity domestic. At the same time, cats in funerary contexts remind us that Egyptian death was never only comforting. The tomb is a protected place because it is threatened. Robbers may break in, decay may advance, names may be forgotten, offerings may stop, demons may challenge the dead, cosmic disorder may interrupt renewal. A cat's presence carries both warmth and warning. It is a companion, but also a hunter. It represents the kind of quiet defense the dead still need. The afterlife is not safe by default. It must be made safe through preparation, ritual, and divine assistance. The relationship between cats and the dead also illuminates the broader Egyptian refusal to isolate human destiny from the natural world. Animals are not background scenery in Egyptian religion. They are active forms through which divine powers can be understood and accessed. In the tomb, cattle provide food, birds fill marshes, dogs accompany hunts, monkeys appear in exotic or ritual roles, and cats guard hunt and signify household completeness. The dead person's eternal world is not purely human. It is ecological. It includes the creatures whose behaviors gave meaning to life along the Nile. The sacredness of cats is therefore part of a much wider Egyptian recognition that human survival depends on animal lives, animal powers, and animal symbols. Still, the cat's funerary role has a special intimacy. A crocodile god may inspire awe, a falcon may lift the king toward the sky, a jackal may guide the dead through necropolis paths, but a cat belongs near the chair. It enters the personal zone. It is not only a cosmic symbol, but a remembered presence. This closeness may explain why modern viewers feel such a strong pull toward Egyptian cats. We recognize across thousands of years the familiar shape of an animal living beside people. Yet the Egyptian version refuses to remain merely familiar. It takes that companion and threads it into death, rebirth, divine protection, and ritual preservation. What survives in tombs and mummies suggests that Egyptians carried their reverence for cats into the afterlife, because the cat had become part of the protected order they wished never to lose. It guarded food, children, women, thresholds, and sleep in life. In death, it could guard memory passage and renewal. It was painted wrapped, offered worn as an amulet, and imagined as a defender against serpents in darkness. The cat's journey from the household to the tomb is not a detour from its sacred meaning. It is the proof of it. In Egypt, anything truly essential to life eventually had to be accounted for in death. The cat had become essential enough to follow, and so in the dim chamber of a tomb where painted banquets never end and carved offerings wait for mouths that no longer open, the cat remains alert. It sits beneath the chair as if the feast is still beginning. It watches the marsh reeds as if something unseen has moved. It rests beside the dead not as an ornament, but as a memory of protection made eternal. The same silent guardian that once moved through a mud-brick house at dawn now keeps company with the dead in the long night beyond the Nile, carrying with it the hope that even there, beyond breath and sunlight, order can still be defended. After the temples quieted, after the old priesthoods lost power, after Egypt passed through Greek rule, Roman rule, Christian transformation, Islamic centuries, colonial excavation museum display, and modern mass imagination, the sacred cat did not vanish. It changed owners, it changed meanings. It was lifted from tomb walls into travel books, from temple ruins into European cabinets, from bronze votive figures into museum cases, from goddess worship into postcards, jewelry cartoons, horror stories, occult fantasies and internet mythology. Few ancient animals have had such a long afterlife in the human imagination. Yet the farther the Egyptian cat travelled from its original world, the easier it became to misunderstand. Bastet became a simplified emblem. Cat mummies became curious. Egyptian reverence became a punchline, a mystery, a romantic fantasy, or a symbol of exotic wisdom. The real history, with all its practicality, tenderness, theology, commerce and contradiction, was often flattened into a single charming idea: Egyptians worshipped cats because they loved them. They did love them, at least in many contexts, but love alone is too small a word for what happened. Greek and Roman observers had already begun the process of translation and distortion. They described Egyptian customs through their own assumptions, sometimes admiring Egyptian antiquity, sometimes mocking what seemed irrational. When they wrote about animal worship, they often treated it as one of Egypt's strangest features. This set the pattern for later centuries. Egypt became the land of riddles, beasts, hidden priests, and ancient secrets. The cat, graceful and unreadable, fit perfectly into that image. It could stand for mystery even when people no longer understood the religious system that had made it sacred. Under Roman rule, Egyptian cults travelled across the Mediterranean in new forms. Isis Serapis, Harpocrates, Anubis and other Egyptian or Egyptianizing deities entered wider religious landscapes adapted to foreign settings and mixed with local ideas. Bastet did not spread with the same reach as Isis, but Egyptian feline imagery remained recognizable. The cat goddess could be interpreted through Greek and Roman categories, sometimes linked loosely with Artemis Diana or other feminine divine figures depending on the observer's needs. Translation helped Egyptian religion survive outside Egypt, but it also changed it. A goddess rooted in Nile households, Delta festivals and temple economies became part of a broader Mediterranean fascination with Egyptian symbols detached from their original soil. With the rise of Christianity in Egypt, old animal cults declined and eventually disappeared as living religious institutions. Temples closed, priestly knowledge faded, hieroglyphic literacy was lost, and the gods who had filled Egyptian sacred life for millennia became ruins, demons, allegories, or memories. The cat did not remain an object of official worship, yet animals do not need temples to remain symbolically charged. In later folklore across many cultures, cats became associated with night secrecy, feminine power, magic, luck, misfortune, and the unseen. These meanings were not simply inherited from Egypt, but Egypt's sacred cat became one thread in a much wider tapestry of feline ambiguity. The same qualities that made cats sacred in Egypt, their independence, night vision, silence, and threshold life, also made them suspicious in other settings. This is one of the great reversals in the cat's history. In Egypt, the cat's liminal nature often made it protective. In much of medieval Europe, similar traits could make it suspect. Cats, especially black cats, became entangled in fears of witchcraft, heresy, demonic companionship, and bad luck. Though these beliefs varied widely by region and period, and should not be exaggerated into a single universal medieval hatred. Still, the contrast is striking. One culture sees the cat as a defender of divine order, another fears it as companion of hidden disorder. The animal itself has not changed. The symbolic framework has. No single explanation fully accounts for these shifting meanings, but they show how animal symbolism depends on the anxieties of the society looking at it. When European travellers, collectors and scholars returned to Egypt in greater numbers from the Renaissance onward, and especially after Napoleon's expedition at the end of the 18th century, ancient Egyptian art re-entered global imagination with enormous force. Hieroglyphs, obelisks, mummies, temples, and animal-headed gods fascinated Europe. Egyptology eventually became a serious scholarly field, especially after the decipherment of hieroglyphs in the 19th century, but popular Egyptomania often moved faster than understanding. Egyptian cats were collected, drawn, displayed, sold, and imitated. Bronze figures of Bastet became icons of ancient elegance. Cat mummies were unwrapped at public events or treated as souvenirs. Sometimes they were shipped in bulk with astonishing disregard. Bodies once dedicated in sacred cemeteries were transformed into commodities for a modern world hungry for antiquity, but not always respectful of it. There is a painful irony in this. The ancient Egyptians wrapped cats to preserve them, to make them endure in relation to the divine. Many modern collectors destroyed them to satisfy curiosity. A mummy that survived 2,000 years underground could be torn open in minutes. Others were ground up or discarded after being removed from their context. Archaeological meaning was lost. The placement of the mummy-associated inscriptions nearby offerings, dating evidence patterns of deposition. The modern fascination with Egyptian cat worship helped keep the subject famous, but it also damaged the very evidence needed to understand it. The evidence remains incomplete partly because time is cruel, but also because modern people were often careless with what ancient people had preserved. As Egyptology matured, scholars began to recover the complexity behind the image. Cat worship was no longer treated simply as proof of exotic superstition. Researchers connected Bastet to broader patterns of Egyptian goddess worship, animal cults, domestic life, agriculture, votive religion, and state ideology. Archaeologists studied mummified cats not as oddities, but as evidence of breeding, ritual economy, embalming methods, temple organization, and popular piety. Art historians examined where cats appear in tomb scenes and what their placement might suggest. Zoo archaeologists analyzed bones. Imaging technologies revealed contents without destroying wrappings. The sacred cat slowly emerged from caricature, though even now popular culture often prefers the simpler version. Modern popular theories sometimes swing too far in the other direction, turning Egyptian cats into vessels of secret powers, alien connections, lost energy systems, or hidden bloodlines of mystical guardians. These ideas are usually unsupported by archaeological evidence. They reveal modern fascination more than ancient reality. The true history is already strange and powerful without invention. Egyptians did not need aliens to make cats sacred. They had grain stores, venomous snakes, dangerous childbirth, solar myths, lioness, goddesses, household affection, temple economies, festivals, mummification, and a worldview in which animals could embody divine qualities. That is more than enough. The unsupported theories often distract from the deeper mystery, not that Egyptians irrationally worshipped an ordinary animal, but that they built a coherent sacred system around qualities of the animal they observed with extraordinary care. The modern internet has added another layer. Bastet is now a global image appearing in tattoos, fantasy art, jewelry, games, spiritual communities, Halloween decorations, and pet culture. Sometimes she's treated respectfully as an ancient goddess. Sometimes she becomes a vague symbol of feminine mystery. Sometimes she's reduced to a stylish cat-headed figure with no historical depth. The Egyptian cat has become instantly recognizable, but recognition is not the same as understanding. People know the silhouette, upright ears, poised body, golden jewelry, dark-lined eyes. They may not know the granary, the lioness, the sistrum, the votive mummy, the festival boats, the child bed, the serpent of chaos, or the temple economy behind it. Even the phrase cat worship can mislead. It sounds simple, almost humorous, as if Egyptians bowed down before any cat that crossed the street. The reality is more layered. Some cats were household companions, some were semi-feral hunters, some were linked to temples, some were bred for offerings, some were mummified as votives, some appeared in art as symbols of fertility protection or elite domestic life. Bastet herself changed over time from fiercer associations toward a more cat-like goddess of joy, fertility and protection. Lioness goddesses remained important. Local cults varied. Foreign observers misunderstood. Modern viewers inherited both the fascination and the distortion. To say Egyptians worshipped cats is not wrong, but it is only the doorway into the subject, not the room. The afterlife of the Egyptian cat also reveals something about modern desire. People are drawn to the idea of a civilization that saw sacredness in an animal so familiar. Unlike a crocodile, falcon, or scarab, the cat still shares our homes. It walks across modern floors, sleeps on modern beds, stares into modern darkness. This continuity makes ancient Egypt feel closer. A bronze cat in a museum does not look like an extinct belief entirely sealed in the past. It resembles an animal that might knock a cup from a table today. That familiarity creates affection, but it can also create projection. Modern cat lovers may imagine ancient Egyptians exactly like themselves, only with more temples. The truth is both closer and farther away. Egyptians knew feline companionship, but they also inhabited a world where divine presence, death ritual purity, and animal bodies carried meanings that modern pet culture cannot fully reproduce. Still, the survival of the sacred cat in modern imagination is not merely a misunderstanding, it is a kind of legacy. The Egyptians succeeded in making the cat unforgettable. Their artists gave it forms of stillness and grace that remain powerful. Their priests, worshippers, and embalmers left behind enough evidence to keep the questions alive. Their myths connected feline power with cosmic defense. Their households placed cats in the center of daily protection. Even distorted the image endured because it rests on real qualities. People continue to recognize the cat's independence, elegance, watchfulness, tenderness, and sudden violence. Across time, the animal still feels like a creature of thresholds. From sacred guardian to museum object, from goddess's animal to internet icon, the Egyptian cat has traveled a long way. Along that journey, it has been honored, mocked, romanticized, damaged, studied, and reinvented. Each age has made its own cat out of Egypt's cat. Greek writers made it strange. Roman satirists made it excessive. Medieval imaginations made cats magical or dangerous in new ways. Modern collectors made mummies into curios. Scholars made them evidence. Popular culture made Bastet into a symbol of mystery and feminine power. Beneath all these layers, the older animal remains the silent hunter at the edge of grain and darkness. The misread symbol still carries the truth that made it sacred in the first place. It stands between worlds, and every age sees something different shining in its eyes. In the end, the question of why Egyptians worshipped cats cannot be answered by choosing only one cause. The cat was useful, but usefulness alone does not create temples, festivals, divine statues, amulets, and cemeteries filled with mummified bodies. The cat was beautiful, but beauty alone does not explain its place in myths of protection and the defeat of chaos. The cat was loved, but affection alone does not explain the organization of sacred animal cults, the power of Bastet, or the intensity with which foreign observers remembered Egyptian reverence. The cat was associated with a goddess, but theology alone does not explain why that association felt so persuasive to ordinary households. The mystery survives because all of these explanations are true at once, and none of them is complete by itself. The ancient Egyptian cat stands at the meeting point of practical need and sacred imagination. It begins with grain rodents, snakes, darkness, and the fragile security of houses along the Nile. This foundation should not be underestimated. In Egypt, agriculture is civilization's heartbeat. The river floods, fields ripen, harvests are stored, and life depends on whether food can be protected from decay, pests, theft, and disaster. A creature that guards grain is not merely convenient. It touches the survival of the family and at larger scales the stability of temples and the state. The cat earns its first reverence by doing something ancient, people can see and value every day. It kills the small enemies of order, but Egyptian religion does not stop at practical observation. It expands it. The mouse in the granary becomes part of a broader pattern of disorder pressing against the boundaries of life. The snake near the house becomes an echo of the serpent that threatens the sun god in the night. The cat's eyes in darkness become signs of watchfulness where human sight fails. Its silent movement makes it a guardian of thresholds. Its independence gives it an aura of otherness. Its tenderness with kittens links it to motherhood and fertility. Its sudden violence links it to lioness goddesses and solar wrath. Its cleanliness, grace, and composure make it suitable for the world of purity, fragrance, and ritual. No single explanation fully accounts for this accumulation of meaning because the cat's power comes precisely from accumulation. Bastet gives that accumulation a divine face. Through her, the cat becomes more than a helpful animal. It becomes a form through which Egyptians can approach protection, joy, fertility, music, sexuality, childbirth, and household safety. Bastet's changing nature reveals a religious culture capable of softening danger without denying it. She carries the memory of lioness fury into a more intimate feline form, turning destructive heat toward guarded life. She is festive because life under protection should be celebrated. She is maternal because the future must be defended at its most vulnerable point. She is associated with pleasure because fertility and joy are part of cosmic order, not distractions from it. To worship Bastet through cats is to honor the force that keeps danger at bay long enough for life to continue. The temple system then transforms personal recognition into public practice. A cat in the home is a guardian. A cat in the temple is a living symbol. A cat mummy is a votive prayer made durable in linen and resin. A bronze statue is a portable form of divine appeal. A festival at Bubastis is devotion made communal, noisy, and physical. These practices show how reverence becomes institution. They also show how institution complicates reverence. The same sacred system that honored cats could breed and kill them for offerings. The same goddess of protection could be approached through animal bodies prepared in mass numbers. The evidence remains incomplete and many details are lost, but the contradiction is undeniable. Egyptian cat worship was not a simple paradise of animal love. It was a religious world in which tenderness, commerce, violence, and hope could exist together. That complexity is one reason the subject remains so fascinating. Modern people often want ancient religion to be either beautiful or cruel, enlightened or superstitious, symbolic or literal. Egypt refuses such clean divisions. Egyptians could love cats and sacrifice cats. They could admire the animal's independence and wrap its body into a controlled ritual object. They could see a cat as a household companion, a temple offering a divine sign, a pest hunter, a fertility symbol, a guardian of the afterlife, and a commercial product within a votive economy. These meanings did not cancel one another. They layered. Ancient life was not organized according to modern categories, and the sacred was not separated from food storage, childbirth, politics, grief, or animal behavior. Foreign misunderstanding made the cat even more famous. Greeks and Romans saw Egyptian reverence through their own cultural lenses, sometimes preserving valuable clues, sometimes turning them into exaggerations. Later centuries inherited those distortions. Egypt became the land of cat worship in a simplified sense, while the real reasons grew hazy. Modern images of Bastet often emphasize elegance and mystery, but omit the granary, the mother in childbirth, the venomous snake, the festival crowd, the temple workshop, the mummified kitten, and the lioness behind the cat's calm face. Yet the simplified symbol endured because it still touched something real. The cat remains even now an animal that feels close and unreachable at the same time. The lasting mystery, then, is not that Egyptians worshipped cats because they misunderstood them. It is that they may have understood them with unusual depth. They noticed the animal's usefulness, but also its contradictions. They saw that the cat belonged to the home without losing the wild. They saw that it could be tender and lethal, visible and secretive, playful and solemn, fertile and predatory. They recognized that such a creature could express a truth central to their worldview order, survives only when guarded by powers capable of confronting disorder. Sometimes those powers are kings, gods, spells, walls, and rituals. Sometimes they are small hunters with bright eyes moving through the dark. This is why the Egyptian cat became sacred. It protected what mattered most: food, children, fertility, sleep, memory, and the boundary between safety and threat. It gave physical shape to divine qualities Egyptians already valued: watchfulness, controlled violence, maternal defense, sensual joy, and protection against chaos. It could be encountered in ordinary life and still point beyond ordinary life. In a civilization that turned the daily rising of the sun into a cosmic victory, the daily work of a cat could also become meaningful. The scale was smaller, but the pattern was the same. Darkness presses in, a guardian meets it, order returns, and perhaps that is why the image still lingers. Not because the Egyptian cat is easy to explain, but because it is difficult in exactly the way ancient Egypt itself is difficult. Practical and mystical, intimate and monumental, tender and severe. The cat beneath the chair and the goddess in the temple are not separate mysteries. They are two forms of the same insight. Life is fragile. The house is vulnerable. The harvest can be lost. The child can fall ill. The sun must pass through danger before dawn. The dead must travel through darkness before renewal. Against all of that, Egypt placed guardians everywhere, in stone, in spells, in crowns, in amulets, in lioness goddesses, and in the small silent animal that watched the room while humans slept. The story of Egypt's cats ends quietly as it began, near the edge of ordinary life. Not in the loudest festival, not in the deepest temple chamber, not in the crowded cemetery of wrapped bodies, but in the half-light between danger and safety. A mud brick house cools after sunset. Grain rests in storage jars. A child sleeps. Beyond the door, reeds shift in the night wind, and the dark carries all the small movements that human ears cannot separate. Somewhere in that darkness, a cat waits. For the Egyptians, this waiting mattered. It was not grand in the way pyramids were grand, not eternal in the way stone inscriptions tried to be eternal. but it touched the same ancient fear that order is delicate. A civilization may raise monuments, command labor, measure fields, and name the stars, yet it still depends on fragile things. A harvest must survive the season. A mother must survive childbirth. A child must survive fever. A body must survive decay long enough for memory to hold. A name must be spoken. A dawn must return. The cat stood near all of these hopes. It guarded the threshold where the safe world became uncertain. It carried the wild into the home without surrendering the wild completely. It reminded Egyptians that protection was not always loud, not always royal, not always carved in stone. Sometimes it moved silently beneath a chair. Sometimes it watched from the roof. Sometimes it appeared only after the danger had already been killed. That may be why the sacred cat still feels so alive across the distance of time. Empires have fallen, temples have broken. The chants to Bastet have faded beyond recovery. The festival boats no longer crowd the canals of Bubastis. Many of the mummified cats have been scattered, studied, damaged, or placed behind glass. Yet the image remains strangely near the poised body, the luminous eyes, the calm face hiding sudden force. Ancient Egypt did not worship cats for one simple reason. It honored them because they gathered many truths into one living form. They were useful and mysterious, affectionate and untamed, domestic and divine. They belonged to the rooms where people ate, slept, loved, feared and prayed. And in those rooms where history is usually too quiet to record, the cat became a guardian of the fragile human world. So the final image is not a statue, but a movement, a small shadow crossing a floor before dawn, pausing at the threshold, listening. Outside, the Nile waits for light. Inside, the household sleeps a little more safely. And for one brief moment in the silence before the sun returns, it is easy to understand why the Egyptians looked at the cat and saw something sacred.